Chapter 341-Advanced City. Sir, I am. Do you want to take action against him? The bald-beard's face was slightly heavy, and he asked tentatively. I have to admit that together, they can't shake Liang. But if the person in front of them initiates an order, no matter how difficult it is, they must follow the other party's opinion to complete it. These remarks made the other 3-5 old stars sigh in their hearts, and their faces gradually became solemn. Liang's strength is definitely something they can't compete with. Heard. On the throne in front, I am leaning back on the chair, with one foot on the rail next to the seat, expressionless, eyes twinkling, lost in thought. The atmosphere has become very depressing. The 5 old stars did not dare to speak easily, and could only wait for Yimu's words. A long time. I am said slowly. No, it's not the time yet. I was just woken up by his Liang, and I haven't reached the time to really wake up. So, during this time, don't provoke him. I can feel that his strength is quite terrifying. Even in my heyday, I have no absolute certainty to take him down. You don't need to say more. After speaking, I am closed his eyes slightly. He completely ignored the expressions of the 5 old stars and fell into 503 feet's sleep again. Yes, Lord, I am. Wu Laoxing nodded and said respectfully. Immediately, they pushed out the flowers one after another, stepping out from the deepest part of Mary Joa. Their faces became particularly heavy, and their hearts were under great pressure. The person that even Lord Yimu is afraid of, Liang. For a while, let's not provoke him. With our current strength, we can't shake her at all. Only when Lord Yimu really wakes up can we do it. That's right, let's endure it for now. Quote. The 5 old stars chatted and quickly dispersed. The hot sun shines down, the blue sea, the sea glitters with golden light, it looks like a liquid formed by a pile of gold. Advance the city. The pirates who ignore the terrifying strength are detained here. From the first time to the 5th floor, as well as the little-known 6th floor Infinite Hell, it is a nightmare for pirates. Especially the 6th layer of Infinite Hell, the pirates in custody, each one of them is a big pirate with a bounty of hundreds of millions of berries, and the strength is tyrannical. It took a lot of money to detain them. At this time, on the 2nd floor, a man in a prisoner uniform and a straw hat was walking down frantically. This person is naturally the Straw Hat Boy, Monkey D. Luffy. Wait a minute. Behind him, a man with a red nose, chasing after him, shouted. Bucky the Clown. The two still meet. Bucky, you are too slow. Luffy shouted with a worried look on his face. He didn't have time to wait for this guy Bucky, but the road was obviously more familiar to him than him, so he had to pull Bucky up and head to the 6th floor of Infinite Hell. I said first, I'm not going there. Bucky looked terrified and hurriedly cleared the relationship. Go to the 6th floor of Infinite Hell. Unless there is something wrong with his brain, otherwise, how could he approach that dangerous place? This is definitely a suicide attempt. Chapter 341-Advanced City. Unless there is something wrong with his brain, otherwise, how could he approach that dangerous place? This is definitely a suicide attempt. There will be many obstacles on the way, and he doesn't want to die like this. He hasn't lived enough yet, how can he die here? Be careful, there are human-faced lions, chicken snakes, poisonous scorpions, etc. Ahead, you don't want to die. With such a big fanfare, I will be killed by you sooner or later. Bucky looked at Luffy's impulsive look, and he felt a sense of retreat. He didn't want to run into those terrifying animals just like that. Even if it was him, it would be difficult to kill them. And, most likely, he will be killed. Well, I'll show you the way, and you go by yourself. Bucky pondered for a moment, his eyes flashed, and said, you just need to go through the corridor ahead, then go straight, and you can see the stairs. There, it will lead you to the next floor, BHCE. Well then, goodbye Bucky. Luffy nodded, taking Bucky's words to heart. Then, he quickly left the place alone. Seeing Luffy's back, Bucky laughed wickedly. Anyway, he didn't know the way to the next floor, it was all nonsense. Immediately, he looked at his surroundings, and a smile appeared on his face. Finally, relying on the power of the Straw Hat Boy, he arrived here. At the very least, there is still a way out. He moved his footsteps and quickly looked around for an opportunity to escape. In the corridor. A few teeth are missing from one's mouth. A burly middle-aged man with a rough appearance, thick hair on his body, and a burly figure, came step by step from afar. He has dark skin, black hair, fluffy hair, and a headscarf. He wore 2 necklaces around his neck, bracelets on his wrists, and jewelry rings of different styles on his 10 fingers. There are 3 flintlock pistols on the left waist, and a bottle of strong rum is stuffed on the right waist. When he appears, he wears a white shirt and a black coat. Beside him, he followed a burly man, a man in a suit like a magician, one riding a horse and one carrying a sniper rifle. This group of people is naturally the members of the Blackbeard Pirates. At this time, Blackbeard, who took the lead, stopped, looked at a burly figure who appeared in front of him, and grinned. The enemy has appeared, little ones, get ready. Directly in front of him, this burly voice was dressed in black clothes, with 2 horn-like things on his head, and a pair of wings similar to nightmares behind him. Blackbeard. Magellan was expressionless, staring coldly at Blackbeard and the others. The venom on his body fell to the ground. The dark purple venom, and the wafting breath were all violently poisonous. Your strength is still very strong, why don't you just let us go? Blackbeard Lang smiled. You broke into the advanced city without authorization. Today, I will arrest you and bring you to justice. Magellan said slowly without any expression. Don't be so impulsive. Blackbeard was about to continue talking. But Magellan has already launched an attack. No more than a comparison. The purple venom on his body, turned into a poisonous dragon, swiftly impacted the area in front. Boom! All Blackbeards were hit by the poisonous dragon, and they were all weak and fell to the ground. Too weak. Magellan glanced lightly at Blackbeard and the others, who were spread by poison, and shook his head. Immediately, he easily walked away from Blackbeard's side step by step. The battle is over before it begins. On the rest of the ground, Blackbeard and others were all lying here, unable to move. However, Blackbeard still has confidence on his face. He is waiting, that partner. Chapter 342-Hawkeye who came to ask for advice. Marin Vando. The scorching light shone down, and on the playground, rows of Navy soldiers were training hard against the hot sun. Even the instructors personally joined the training. In order to meet the coming war, they can be said to be quite prepared. In a not far location. A towering building heavily folded. This is where the Navy lives. A few days ago, Chiwahai also ushered in. This made the surrounding Navy a little inexplicable panic. But fortunately, Akainu lives in this area, which can give them a sedative for ordinary soldiers. In a certain house, Li Ang was lying on the sofa, with his right arm around Hancock, and his life was relaxed and comfortable. In 2 days, war is about to break out. Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered, and he said slowly. As long as there is Li Ang's company, no matter what it is, it will not affect her too much. Whitebeard, I'm afraid it's already lurking. Li Ang said with a smile. He never forgot that the Whitebeard pirates emerged from the bottom of the sea after being coated, and then appeared directly on the coast in the center of Marin Vidad. Of course. Even so, in the end, if nothing else happens, the Navy headquarters will win. Although it was a tragic victory, it was also a victory. If there is no red hair to appear, everyone in the Whitebeard pirates will be surrounded and suppressed here. But these, to Li Ang, are not important things. Anyway, he stayed in Marinfando just for Hancock. As for the so-called battle, it had little to do with him. On the contrary, here, he can enjoy the carefree feeling, which surprised him very much. The days here are quite good. The environment is elegant, and the naval headquarters is not stingy when it comes to entertaining guests. Li Ang stretched his hands and hugged Hancock's soft body directly into his arms. Feeling the soft and cold touch, he narrowed his eyes slightly, feeling infinitely comfortable. Hancock blushed slightly, buried his head in Li Ang's chest, wrapped his slender arms around Li Ang's shoulders, did not speak, just listened to Li Ang's heartbeat. Hancock, the sound insulation here is very good, do you want to come again? Li Ang looked at Hancock with a meaningful smile and said, No, I haven't recovered from yesterday's injury. Hancock's pretty face blushed, and he said coquettishly, Yesterday, she was crazy with Li Ang all day, and her current injury has not yet fully recovered. Every time, he was defeated in front of Li Ang, and after finally begging for mercy, he was still not let go by Li Ang. Therefore, this also caused the two have been fighting for such a long time, and Hancock will still be injured frequently. Then you'll have to get used to it. Li Ang smiled a little narrowly. Hancock turned his head away. His neck as white as jade was red with half the sky. It looked like the sunset on the horizon, and the red was intoxicating. Li Ang couldn't help but leaned over and took a sip. There was a direction from the tip of his nose, which made him take a deep breath and couldn't help but linger. Hancock shuddered, pushed Li Ang away quickly, and said angrily, No. She wore a purple slit-style robe to outline her perfect figure. Sitting on the sofa, her long legs as white as jade were even more visible in Li Ang's eyes, as white as snow. Just when Li Ang wanted to go further. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. With a swish, Hancock blushed and hurriedly returned to the room. Chapter 342-Eagle Eyes Who Come to Ask for Advice. With a swish, Hancock blushed and hurriedly returned to the room. In the empty hall, only Li Ang was left, looking helplessly in the direction of the gate, and stood up from the sofa. Who is it? Crunch. The door was opened by him, and the people outside appeared in his eyes. This person was wearing black clothes, with a black hat, a pair of sharp eyes, people dare not look directly, and a cross knife on his back. Hawkeye. Li Ang was a little surprised, and couldn't help asking angrily, What are you doing here? I don't remember, I asked you to come here. Unsolicited, please forgive me. Hawkeye was very cautious, bowed solemnly, and said, Then, you must have something to do with me. Tell me, what's the matter? Li Ang gradually walked back to the sofa and asked lightly. Damn Hawkeye, ruining his good deeds. He also wanted to fight Hancock for a few hundred more rounds. But now with the arrival of Hawkeye, there is no chance whatsoever. It would be strange if he was in a better mood. I want to come and teach you about your swordsmanship. Hawkeye took a deep breath and said with a firm face. Obviously, this plan was decided by him after thinking for a long time. The arrogant Eagle Eye actually came to ask for swordsmanship. Li Ang was also a little stunned, and said with a smile, You're not joking, are you also coming to ask me about swordsmanship? No matter how I look at it, it doesn't seem to be true. Please enlighten me. Hawkeye bowed slightly, with a serious expression, and said seriously. Immediately, Li Ang also restrained his smile and looked at the eagle eye in front of him. He could see that Hawkeye was not joking, but serious. However, he still couldn't believe that the arrogant swordsman Hawkeye would actually wrong himself and come to him to ask him about swordsmanship. This is so much fun. His initially impatient mood gradually calmed down. Taking advantage of this time, it seems to be a good thing to use this guy Hawkeye to pass the time. Thinking of this, Li Ang showed a meaningful smile and said, It's not impossible to ask for advice, but are you ready for your mentality? I'm ready. Hawkeye nodded solemnly and said. After a lot of thinking, he chose to come and ask Li Ang for advice. Because he felt that his swordsmanship seemed to be stuck. The road ahead had been blocked, and he was completely unable to make further progress. On the road ahead, Li Ang was standing on the commanding heights, so after deep thinking, he decided to come to Liang and ask him for advice. For the breakthrough of swordsmanship, he also pulled down his face, and did not care about his own face at all. Except for Liang, there is no one in this world who can teach him. As the #1 swordsman in the old world, only Liang, who took away his title, is qualified to teach his swordsmanship. Others are far from qualified. Moreover, Hawkeye can feel that he still has a long way to go before Liang's swordsmanship field. Perhaps, it is impossible to get close to each other's footsteps in this life. However, he is still willing to keep practicing for the sake of swordsmanship. Even if he can't surpass Liang, he must aim at Liang and keep getting closer to the opponent. This is his wish now. There is a target to chase, and when you practice swordsmanship, it will not be so boring. Chapter 343-Swordsmanship Guidance. Your request, I complied. Get ready, let's get started now. The corners of Liang's mouth were slightly raised, and he smiled lightly. Now. Hawkeye was also very surprised. He didn't expect Liang to accept his request so easily, which was completely different from the Liang he knew. However, after half an hour, he finally understood why Liang agreed so readily. The two gradually walked out of the room and came to the empty playground of Marin Fando. The surrounding group of Navy looked suspiciously at both Liang and Hawkeye, puzzled. Chihuahai, Hawkeye Mahawk, and the world's largest swordsman Liang, why are these two people here at the same time, and they are still together? Don't they practice fighting? My God, this kind of battle is rare. One is the former world's #1 swordsman, and the other is the current world's #1 200 inches great swordsman. The collision between the two is simply too exciting. Just by imagining it, I can make up the picture of them fighting. This is a good opportunity to learn. Go and tell others to come. A group of Navy was dispatched one after another. Immediately after. Less than 3 minutes. Around the playground where Liang and Hawkeye were standing, a large group of Navy was already surrounded, looking at the two of them in the center of the field with excitement. It's like looking at a very rare thing. It seems that you and I are still quite popular. Liang glanced at the dark Navy around him and smiled lightly. This kind of battle is rare. Hawkeye looked at Liang with a solemn expression and said, "Swordsmanship guidance, naturally, should be guided by battle." Therefore, he knew very well what kind of terrifying existence he was facing. Immediately, Hawkeye took out one of the supremely fast knives, Hei Dao Yi, from his back, holding the handle of the knife in both hands, ready to fight, looking at Liang seriously. Outside the arena, a group of Navy roared with excitement. It's about to start, they're about to start fighting. Don't be noisy, just be quiet, I have to seriously observe their battles. If we can understand a little bit of battle at this level, it will benefit us a lot. No, let me, at the very least, let me see who is inside. You are late, Liang and Hawkeye. The collision between these two top swordsmen can be described as shocking. Who do you think will win? Isn't this nonsense? Liang. This is the current world #1. However, Hawkeye is not weak. This battle, won't he want to regain the title of world #1? There was a lot of talk, and each Navy soldier focused his attention on the position ahead. Inside the field. Liang slowly pulled out the first-generation Gush. His face was calm, and he smiled lightly. They all said, "You want to take back the title of the world's greatest swordsman." I still have self-knowledge. Hawkeye's face was heavy, and his heart was under great pressure. He understands that now he is still a long way from Liang. This distance cannot be filled in a short period of time. The reason why he was defeated was not because Liang happened to defeat him, but because Liang in front of him absolutely suppressed him in terms of strength. He was not unjustly defeated, and Liang defeated him from the front, and never took advantage of opportunities. Moreover, the strength that Liang used at that time was not full strength. In this regard, the pressure in Hawkeye's heart increased in vain. If Li Ang in front of him was doing his best, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to hold it for even a minute. Do not. 1 minute was too long, 30 seconds, he couldn't last. Come on, let me see if your swordsmanship has improved during this time. Chapter 343_Swordsmanship Guidance. Come on, let me see if your swordsmanship has improved during this time. Li Ang laughed, holding the first-generation Gush, pointing at Hawkeye, and said, "Then I'll do it." Hawkeye did not hold back, holding the handle of the knife with both hands, slammed into a sharp slash. At this time, with Li Angchen, it was his own death. He knew that the distance from Li Ang was too far, so he did not reserve his full strength to explode his power. A sharp slash, as if piercing the air, suddenly arrived in front of Li Ang. So strong. The navies who were far apart were moved, feeling the terrifying power of this slash, which made their hearts go cold, and goosebumps appeared on their bodies. If they were to confront this slash head-on, they would not have the slightest confidence that they would be able to block Hawkeye's move. On the contrary, they will be very sure that they will definitely die under this slashing attack. Will Li Ang deal with this? A navy looked at Li Ang's position and whispered. Everyone watched the battle that broke out on the battlefield. How will Li Ang resist this move by Hawkeye? This made everyone very puzzled. They watched quietly, their throats were dry, their eyes did not blink, and they stared at any changes in the battlefield. I see. Li Ang moved, holding the first-generation Gush in hand, and slowly put it down. Call out. Another dazzling slash attacked Hawkeye's attack. Boom. The two collided, and a terrifying airflow swept the audience. A group of navies near the periphery of the battle between the two were involuntarily shaken back several steps. This is still because someone behind them is blocking them, otherwise, it is conceivable that they will be directly shocked. What a terrible confrontation. This is the collision of the top swordsman. My God, it's too strong. In this short fight, who is stronger and who is weaker? Look. Suddenly, a voice came out. A navy pointed at the battlefield and lost his voice. There was a scar on Hawkeye's clothes, and his clothes were torn apart. The incision was very smooth. On the ground behind him, a bottomless knife mark appeared. Silence. Everyone fell silent, staring blankly at what was happening in front of them. Hawkeye, even Li Ang's knife can't stop it. If it weren't for this slash deviating from the original trajectory, I'm afraid that Hawkeye would have been pierced through the heart. In this way, no matter how strong the 5.4 Hawkeye's vitality was, he would have to die on the spot. At this moment, even Hawkeye himself stiffened, and cold sweat dripped from his forehead. The terrifying aura just now made him clearly feel it. The breath of death lingered on the tip of his nose. He understands that Li Ang just now has stopped, otherwise, it will not be the ground cracked, but his body will be chopped open. In just one face-to-face, he was abused to the core. Li Ang, who held the first-generation Gush in his hand, was obviously stronger. So strong, this monster. Hawkeye sucked in a breath of cold air, and then he looked behind him with hindsight. The bottomless crack on the ground made his spine wet with cold sweat, and the whole indifferent face became unnatural, and he swallowed hard. Chapter 344_Hanging Hammer. Fortunately, this fierce slash did not hit me. In other words, it was Li Ang who stopped. Otherwise, he has just died. Without any possibility of survival, his body will definitely be cut in two. Immediately, Hawkeye couldn't help but feel fortunate, and looked at Li Ang in front of him. His expression became very complicated. At first, he thought he could compete with the opponent 1 or 2 times, but now that he looked at it, he couldn't even stop the opponent's first move, let alone anything else. Li Ang in front of him is obviously going to be more arrogant. The reason for the first generation of Onishi. Hawkeye thought for a moment, shook his head quickly, and denied, "No, the most important thing is that Li Ang's swordsmanship is too terrifying. Otherwise, other people would not be able to exert such terrifying strength at all." Thinking of this, he took a deep breath and calmed down. He held the place where He Daoyi was holding his hands, and unknowingly, hot sweat broke out. Where he held the handle of the knife, a layer of sweat was disturbing him. Too nervous. Hawkeye let out a breath, looked at Li Ang, and calmed down a little. Is this nervous? Li Ang laughed and said slowly, if you're nervous, how will you collide with me next? How will I know about your swordsmanship? Come again. Hawkeye's eyes flashed, his face was heavy, and he said, good. Li Ang nodded and said. The dialogue between the two, without any cover-up, naturally spread to the ears of every Navy present. They were even more shocked by this. It turned out to be. In order to improve his swordsmanship, Hawkeye asked Li Ang to fight with him. My goodness. This is the original world's largest swordsman, he actually asked others to teach swordsmanship. This is so unbelievable. Hawkeye, he actually pulls his face down and asks others to teach swordsmanship, I've seen it in a raw film. Yes, but Li Ang does have this qualification to guide Hawkeye. I don't know about others, Li Ang definitely has this qualification. That's right, Li Ang defeated Li Ang just now in a face-to-face meeting. Who else can do it? That's right. Therefore, it is only reasonable for Hawkeye to ask Li Ang for advice. In order to improve his swordsmanship, it is enough to ask someone who is stronger than himself for advice. Quote. A group of navies rose up one after another, looking at the clash of battlefields ahead, their expressions became even more excited. Even Hawkeye is working so hard, they can't find a reason to be lazy. As tyrannical as Eagle Eyes, he is looking for countless ways to improve his swordsmanship. And they are just ordinary Navy soldiers, how can they fall behind? After watching this fight, I'm going to double my training. A Navy soldier gritted his teeth and said with a firm expression. Me too, me too. Quote. A group of Navy made up their minds. Center of the battlefield. Li Ang and Hawkeye were completely unaware that their battle had brought such a big change to these navies. However, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. It's too slow. Li Ang shook his head, holding the first-generation Goosh in his hand, and directly smashed Hawkeye's sword into the air. Puff! He Daoyi inserted into the ground and submerged about half a meter. Hawkeye's hands were numb, he stared blankly at his own hands, and then looked at Li Ang in front of him. A huge gap was created in his heart, which could not be crossed. But he was also excited. Chapter 344-Hanging Hammer. But he was also excited. Really? Asking Li Ang to teach swordsmanship is the right choice. Come again. Hawkeye's face was firm, he picked up his saber from the ground, and attacked Li Ang again. Not long ago. His black saber knight was knocked flying again. Li Ang calmly pointed the first-generation ghost at Hawkeye's neck, and said lightly, you lost again. This time, you were too impatient to find my loopholes to defeat me. Instead, you revealed your own loopholes in my eyes. Come again. Hawkeye gritted his teeth and nodded. It is unbelievable that the former world's greatest swordsman has been abused to such an extent that he has absolutely no strength to struggle. He turned his head, picked up his saber, Hidoye, and attacked Li Ang again. This time, he did not rush for success, but for stability, looking at Li Ang in front of him. His steps were steady, every time it was a tentative attack, and he did not dare to go too deep. Do you know how to be cautious? Li Ang's eyes flashed, and with a smile, he praised, it's a good awakening, but it's not enough. No matter how careful you are, if you don't attack, you won't be able to defeat me. After he finished speaking, he kicked his feet, and the figure disappeared from Hawkeye's sight. It's that terrifying speed again. Hawkeye's face changed dramatically, his eyes turned, and the color of seeing and hearing spread to the limit, trying to find Li Ang's voice. Here. His eyes flickered, and he fiercely held the black knight and stabbed himself in the back. Boom. Li Ang's figure appeared, holding the first-generation Goosh, blocking Hawkeye's attack, and with a slight smile, said, "Very good, I can actually detect my speed. Then, I will use 40% of my speed. The speed is up, you have to be careful. Is the current speed less than 40%? Hawkeye's Shinlai was heavy and quickly took a few steps back to distance himself from Liang. He really couldn't believe that Liang's terrifying speed was less than 40%. Then, the next Liang he has to face will only be more terrifying. Thinking of this, he felt a heavy heart. He held the hilt of He Daoye tightly with both hands, staring at Liang, not daring to restrain his expression to prevent Liang from attacking suddenly. "I'm going to attack." Liang laughed, showing his white teeth, said. Immediately, his entire body disappeared from Hawkeye's sight. Next moment, Hawkeye still hasn't reacted. Boom! A huge force came from his waist. How is it possible? Hawkeye's eyes widened, full of shock. The speed of 40% has already made him unable to react. This Liang is too terrifying. Puff! He flew upside down more than 10 meters, rubbed against the ground, a trace of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and his clothes were cut with blood. Fortunately, in the end, he used the armed color domineering, which prevented the skin from being worn. However, after being hit by Liang, he still looked painful. This was brought about by Liang's constraining his strength at the last critical moment. Otherwise, Hawkeye is now dead. The entire fight took less than 10 minutes. However, if it was really put on the battlefield, Hawkeye would have died no less than 100 times. This number is really unbelievable, but it is a fact. The surrounding navy was numb, staring blankly at Hawkeye, who was knocked flying again, and then looking at Liang who was unscathed, with no dust on his body. The two form a strong contrast. The level of this strength is simply not on the same level. Chapter 345 was abused. Hawkeye, being beaten like this is really unbelievable. After all, he is also the original world's greatest swordsman. There is no other way. I can only say that Liang is too strong. It is so powerful that even Hawkeye can't compete. Have you found it? From the beginning, Liang did not make more than 3 moves. My God. That is to say, within 3 moves, Hawkeye will be defeated. Quote. Numerous navies were boiling, staring blankly at the battlefield in front of them, their faces full of astonishment. Hawkeye was really abused so badly that he was completely slung and beaten unilaterally, and was powerless to fight back. It always feels like they are facing Hawkeye, similar to Hawkeye facing Liang, the same lack of strength, constant attack, and finally ushered in the fate of being repelled. The center of the battlefield. Liang looked at the eagle eyes in front of him, his eyes twinkled brightly, and smiled. "Are you okay? Come again." Hawkeye's eyes were full of unyielding aura, gritted his teeth. He stood up from the ground, holding the black sword knight in both hands, and slashed out. Call out. A sharp slash attacked Liang's position. But Liang was very relaxed, he lifted his right hand slightly and slid down. Boom. A loud bang. The ground raised bursts of dust, covering the entire scene. At the same time, Liang saw the figure of Hawkeye, passing through the fog of dust, holding the black sword knight. The speed skyrocketed, and attacked with a fierce momentum. The tactics are very good, but it also depends on the opponent. It's a pity that the opponent you face is me. Liang said with a little admiration, and the whole person disappeared within the sight of Eagle Eye. What about people? The eagle-eyed figure stopped abruptly and looked around quickly. It was originally an attack that he actively brewed, but Liang turned it into a passive one. The scene completely followed Liang's rhythm, while Hawkeye was just a small pawn that moved along with the rhythm. Boom! A terrifying force came from his ribs. His eyes widened, only to see that Liang's figure was already standing beside him at some point, smiling and relaxed, which made him unacceptable. When Hawkeye flew more than 10 meters across, staring at Liang's figure in a daze. Until he fell to the ground, he still couldn't come back to his senses. Li Ying's speed is the biggest nightmare in his life. A long time. He calmed down and stood up from the ground. He was already embarrassed. Moreover, there were many perforations in his clothes, which were worse than ordinary naval soldiers. Just like the pirates caught by the navy, they look unsightly. The arrogant eagle eye also has such a gesture, which really opened another door for them. Forget it, I'll fight you with pure swordsmanship. If you just use speed to torture you, it doesn't seem very kind. You can't learn much swordsmanship. Li Ying thought for a while, then smiled slowly. Okay, come again. Hawkeye didn't speak much, and with a move of his feet, he launched the attack again. At this time, Li Ying no longer used his speed to bully Hawkeye. Instead, he stood on the spot, accompanied by Hawkeye's attack, holding the first-generation Gito with one hand in his right hand, constantly blocking Hawkeye's swordsmanship attack, but did not resolve it. Boom, boom, boom. The sword attacks of both are very fast, and the surrounding navy can no longer see the shadow of the blade. A burst of fire flickered, and a crisp and pleasant voice hovered around. All the navy stared blankly at the fight between the two pure swordsmanship. The speed of these two people is too fast, and people can only see the blurred afterimage, and they have no idea where the knife in their hands will reach in the next second. How fast? Their speed, too fast. Chapter 345 was abused. How fast? Their speed, too fast. Isn't it that the collision of pure swordsmanship is so terrifying? Many navies looked at the battle in front of them in shock. Li Ying's face was calm, and his swordsmanship accelerated, which was faster than Hawkeye's. He directly suppressed Hawkeye and beat the opponent to retreat. Soon, there was chaos in Hawkeye's swordsmanship. Taking advantage of the opponent's inability to recover in a short time, Li Ying's attack became more and more violent. Boom! A voice sounded. Li Ying held the first-generation gouge, pointed at Hawkeye's neck, and said lightly, "You still lose. Come again." Hawkeye turned around, held He Daoye in his hand again and looked at Li Ying with a firm tone and said, "No matter how many times he fails, he keeps moving forward. This is the capital that he can become the world's largest swordsman." Although it is said that the title of the world's largest swordsman has been taken away by Li Ying, he believes that one day, he will surpass Li Ying with swordsmanship. "You know, I only used 30% of my swordsmanship." There was a smile on Li Ying's face, putting pressure on Hawkeye again. Hearing this, Hawkeye's face became heavier and he felt a lot of pressure in his heart. Only 30% of the swordsmanship level, he completely suppressed him. How long will he be able to support it if he bursts out with all his strength? 10 seconds. 5 seconds. He can't know the answer to these, but he knows that he is not qualified to let Li Ying make a full shot. Fight again. Hawkeye looked at Li Ying with a serious expression in his eyes. As you wish. Li Ying smiled, looking at Hawkeye's firm look. He seemed to feel a little bit. People who work hard are easy to win the favor of others. Although, I am the least qualified to say this. He thought to himself, but still had a strange feeling. It seems that if the system is directly endowed with the ultimate swordsmanship, I really have never experienced the feeling of hard work. He doesn't need to work hard, he can easily surpass anyone who works hard. Of course. No one knows this. Everyone thinks that Li Ying also has this terrifying strength after strict training. Who can guess that, in fact, Li Ying only has the golden finger of the system. Front. Hawkeye attacked again, holding the Black Knife Knight, and took the initiative to break out a fierce offensive. I'll use 40% of my swordsmanship. I hope you can gain more. Li Ying's eyes flickered and he smiled. He is holding the first generation of ghosts, and his swordsmanship is even more mysterious. Eagle Eye was under a lot of pressure, looking at Li Ying's swordsmanship, and unknowingly, he was actually driven by the opponent's swordsmanship, and the original attack trajectory was completely changed. Boom! Li Ying slashed and hit Eagle Eye's Black Blade Knight head-on, bringing a terrifying force. The shock ability made Eagle Eye's hands a little numb. At the same time, Li Ang turned around, and the first generation Goosh had already arrived at the neck of Hawkeye. Once again, he won. This is just the beginning, is it the end? Hawkeye's heart was bitter, and he felt the cold blade on his neck, which made him feel very complicated. 40% of the swordsmanship level has completely beat him. He didn't expect any more, and could see Li Ang's full-strength dispatch. Chapter 346 The Navy was stunned. In front of Li Ang, being able to hold on for a minute is an extravagant hope for him. Are you still coming? Li Ang slowly retracted the first-generation Goosh, and said with a smile. Come on. Hawkeye's face was calm, he nodded, and said. He held the black sword knight in both hands and looked at Li Ang, very serious and dignified, not daring to be careless. In an instant, he kicked his feet, and the attack quickly broke out. Li Ang was expressionless, holding the first-generation Goosh, and waving it casually, blocking Hawkeye's attack, bringing bursts of crisp sounds that echoed around. Boom, boom, boom. The two fought no less than 10 moves in an instant, and the blade was covered with armed colors, which made the weapon indestructible and effectively prevented the blade from being worn out. If it is an ordinary weapon confrontation, this situation will naturally not occur. But these two are supremely fast knives. In terms of material, both knives are the same. But there is a demon in the first generation of ghosts, and Hei Daoye has no spirituality, it is just a dead thing with the power of the supreme sword, and there is no spirituality at all. Of course. This world has its own spiritual weapon, and I am afraid that it is only the first generation ghost in Li Ang's hands. But the first generation of Goosh also appeared based on talent, and 827, like the man in kimono from the 5 Old Stars, has never communicated with the demons in the first generation of Goosh in his life. The demon has been waiting, and the man in kimono lost control of his body, so he hid in the weapon and waited for so many years. It's just that Li Ang knew this for a long time, and he also had absolute strength to convince the devil. This will allow the first generation of Gitoru to be completely integrated with himself, and to exert the most complete power of the first generation of Gito. The level of swordsmanship is still very strong, but the speed and skills are still slightly lacking. Li Ang calmly dealt with Hawkeye's attack and seemed to be able to handle it with ease. In his eyes, looking at the picture of Hawkeye attacking hard, he couldn't help but admire the other party's serious demeanor. With this serious attitude, you can learn more about your own shortcomings. Hawkeye is meticulous about swordsmanship and does not allow the slightest slack. This kind of person can go forward and become stronger. Now Li Ang also found that he is more and more appreciative of this guy Hawkeye. There are loopholes. Li Ang's eyes flickered, holding the first-generation ghost, directly penetrating the hole in the eagle eye. The back of the knife collided with the opponent's blade, and the huge force generated by B instantly hit the weak area of the eagle eye's blade. Coincidentally, Hawkeye's hands were numb from the shock, and he felt that there was nowhere to use it. His eyes widened, and the black knife in his hand flew a few meters away and fell into the ground. Lose again. Hawkeye took a deep breath, adjusted his mentality, and his face was solemn. After fighting for so long, he has more or less understood the gap between Li Ang and his own strength, which cannot be described in words. The gap is too far. He stood in front of Li Ang like a child, while Li Ang, as an adult, was teaching him how to use the knife and where there were loopholes. This feeling, many years ago, he never felt again. Since he became the world's largest swordsman, he has never felt this way again. The taste of being taught is really indescribable. Hawkeye thought in his heart. His eyes became very sharp. He walked to the side of Hei Daoye, held the handle of the knife in both hands, looked at Li Ang again, and broke out to attack. Boom, boom, boom. The two collided. Chapter 346 The Navy was stunned. The two collided. Many times, it can be seen that Hawkeye is directly forced to retreat. The black knife in his hand was blown away in the night, the knife was directly pressed against his neck, etc. In various ways, Hawkeye was defeated in a mess, and he couldn't find any confidence at all. The surrounding navy was also stunned, staring blankly at the battle in front of him. Liang's strength made them feel deeply admired. And Hawkeye's fighting spirit also gave them some recognition. Being able to endure so many defeats and still going on the offensive is what they need to learn. These two people are monsters. Hawkeye keeps being defeated, keeps standing up, and still maintains self-confidence in his swordsmanship and has no doubts at all, which shows that his mind is quite firm. And Liang is even more terrifying. From the beginning to the present, he has defeated Hawkeye no less than a few hundred times. In each round, Hawkeye can't last for 15 seconds. It's too strong. He may not have used his full strength. My God, how can such a monster exist in this world? Quote. A group of Navy was stunned, dumbfounded, looking at the battlefield ahead. Some of them have been silent, and they really don't know what to say to express their feelings. Liang's tyrannical strength gave them a heavy sense of oppression. It was almost a feeling that they didn't have the courage to face them because they were far apart. You know, this is still giving these people the feeling of being unable to compete even when Liang deliberately suppressed the murderous aura of the first generation of ghosts. If the first generation of ghosts were completely erupted, it would be normal for this group of people to kneel down with that terrifying murderous aura. What's even more terrifying is to directly crush the fighting spirit and spirit of these people, and turn them into a fool, insane. Mr. Liang, too strong. A navy was full of admiration, looking at Liang's figure, said. It was as if they had forgotten about the destruction of the G4 branch. The strong will always be admired by thousands of people. No matter how many contradictions there were before, in a word, as long as the current Liang is not on their opposite side, they will worship Liang. No hatred lasts to the end. Whether it is the navy, the pirates, or the Revolutionary Army. As time passed, everyone chose to subconsciously forget. Position in front. The fight between Liang and Hawkeye is still going on. Boom, boom, boom. A burst of crisp and melodious sound came out. The collision of the knife and the knife, the collision of the armed color and the armed color, produced bursts of fire, which looked quite ornamental. The speed of Liang and Hawkeye was so fast that the surrounding navies couldn't see what they were doing, and could only see afterimages touching each other. What a fast swordsmanship, this level of fighting. I didn't say, I might die 9 times with this knife. No, they are too strong. The top swordsmen in this world are indeed well deserved. I always have a feeling that after watching their fight, my swordsmanship level has improved in a straight line. Fuck, you feel the same way, and so do I. Quote. A group of navies stared at the battle ahead without blinking. This kind of battle scene is rare, and they can harvest as much as they can. Anyway, they do not expect to be able to fully learn the collision of the top swordsmen. But if they can learn a little, it will be very useful for them. Chapter 347 high-level officials have come. However, the pitfalls also follow. With a learning attitude, they carefully observe the battle between Liang and Hawkeye ahead. But no matter how they look at it, they can't learn. What reason? First, the speed of the two is too fast. Second, and this is also the most important point, Hawkeye, this kid, lost too fast. Before he even started, he has already lost, and they can't even watch it if they want to. The same picture was repeated every time, and within 15 seconds, Hawkeye would be defeated. They were all numb to this. Who can tell me, is this really the confrontation between the two world's largest swordsmen? Why do I always feel like an ordinary person challenging the world's largest swordsman? No, Hawkeye lost too fast, and I want to learn more about swordsmanship. I didn't expect it. I really didn't expect this to happen. It's not that Hawkeye is too weak, but Liang is too strong. Quote. Numerous navy whispered, helplessly sighed, said. This time it's down. I still want to learn a wave, so look at it, learn a wool. The sun shines down. Above tall buildings. Inside the marshal's office. Warring States was sitting in a chair, looking at the Navy soldier in front of him, his brows furrowed, and he said, "You mean, Hawkeye is challenging Liang?" "Yes, Marshal of the Warring States period." The Navy soldier nodded quickly and told the truth. The two are fighting on the playground, and there are already a group of colleagues around. "Take me to see. It's this time," and the two of them are still worried. Warring States waved his hand, looking very helpless. It is about to face a war with the Whitebeard pirates, and any casualties at this time are a huge blow to their naval headquarters. In any case, Hawkeye can't be hit hard. From the beginning to the end, the Warring States period did not consider whether Liang would be hit hard by Hawkeye. In his eyes, Hawkeye wanted to defeat Liang. It was a dream. Didn't you see this hideous scar on his own body? Even he was hit hard by Liang in an instant, let alone Hawkeye. Even if you give 10 eagle eyes, I am afraid that it will not be a place for Liang. Come on, let's go and see. Warring States took a deep breath and said, "You can't let them do anything wrong." "Yes, Marshal of the Warring States period." The Navy soldier nodded quickly and said. The two quickly left the Marshal's office. The location of the playground, the empty playground, was surrounded by groups of navies, and the place was filled with water. Under the sunlight, the temperature gradually rose, making people sweat stains on their foreheads, but they still did not choose to leave, but focused on the battlefield ahead. This picture is a little surprising. A group of navies formed a circle, facing the big sun, watching the outbreak of the battle here, which really did not match the Navy people imagined. Not far away. A man wearing a pink feather shirt and sunglasses looked towards this position with a thick smile on his face. Looks like there's a lot of fun. Doflamingo flicked his fingertips, his feet stepped on the invisible thread, and he stood up to the sky. While looking down, he saw the battle between Liang and Hawkeye. Chapter 347 High-level officials have come. While looking down, he saw the battle between Liang and Hawkeye. It's incredible, the battle between these two people. However, isn't this guy Hawkeye looking for abuse? Even I don't dare to ask Mr. Liang to practice. Doflamingo thought to himself, his smile narrower. As expected. He continued to look, and saw the picture of Hawkeye being hung with a hammer. This is rare. The former world's largest swordsman was hanged and beaten by the current world's largest swordsman. The difference in strength between the two was too great. Hawkeye was beaten while hanging. With a smile on his face, Doflamingo said. What is certain is that in the Chiwu Sea, no one can compete with Liang. Even the Navy headquarters had difficulty finding an existence that could compete with Liang one-on-one. And right now, Hawkeye's actions, in his opinion, are undoubtedly asking for trouble. I wouldn't be so stupid to beat myself up. Well. Suddenly, Doflamingo's eyes flashed and he looked to another location. I see. Moonlight Moria also appeared on the tower not far away, looking at the battle below, looking very excited and excited. Thinking of the close relationship between Yugong Moria and Liang, Doflamingo responded with a kind smile, looked at Yugong Moria like a glance, and both nodded their heads. If there is no Liang, Doflamingo will not pay attention to Moonlight Moria at all. However, with the existence of Liang's relationship, it is absolutely beneficial for him to deal with Moonlight Moria well. Afterwards, Doflamingo looked to another location, his eyes flashed, and the corners of his mouth moved slightly. Others have also come. But yes, this kind of battle is rare. In his sight, it can be seen that the three generals of the Navy, Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji are already standing not far away, watching the battle between Liang and Hawkeye, silent. Quote. This kind of battle, even the generals dare not participate in it. Doflamingo said with a smile. In addition, he also saw that Lieutenant General Garp was also hidden in an inconspicuous corner, watching the evolution of the battle, calmly. It's really a big fanfare, and almost all the forces that the entire naval headquarters can dispatch are concentrated here. Brother Doflamingo smiled slowly, his eyes swept away. He saw the Warring States Marshal walking step by step from the building. At this time, all the military forces of the Navy have been assembled. Chihuahua was also assembled, and the high-level personnel of the Navy headquarters watched the continuation of the battle. A corner strip. Hancock was wearing a purple slit-style robe, looking at Li Ang holding the heroic figure of the first generation of ghosts. His pretty face was slightly red, with a strong sense of admiration. Zhao, who was over, especially seeing Li Ang completely suppressing Hawkeye's picture, it really fascinated her. With a swish, Hancock's delicate face was blushing, and thoughts were running through his head. She often thinks of the picture of marrying Li Ang now. This made her feel very shy and indescribable. Front. The Navy was a little bit shocked. Obviously, they also saw the movement of the high-level personnel. Marshal of the Warring States is here, and Lieutenant General Garp over there. The three generals of Red Dog, Yellow Monkey, and Green Pheasant, my God, are all here. And Chihuahua, this battle is really attracting attention. Quote. The scene became very noisy, and everyone watched the changes on the battlefield attentively. Neither Li Ang nor Hawkeye noticed that this ordinary exchange of swordsmanship actually attracted so many people, and even the high-level officials of the Navy headquarters were alarmed. Chapter 348_Swordmaster. I didn't expect our battle to attract so many people. Li Ang held the first-generation goosh, looked at Hawkeye, and smiled slowly. Hawkeye's face was calm, and he said, both you and me represent the world's top swordsman masters. Naturally, it is normal for them to come to watch the battle. Obviously, he had anticipated this situation. He still has a lot of confidence in his own influence. Not to mention, there is still a Li Ang in front of him, who can fully call on people from the Navy headquarters to come and watch. Do you understand? Li Ang looked at the other party's appearance and asked lightly. After playing against each other for so long, it should be more or less that Hawkeye has learned something. I know a thing or two. Hawkeye thought for a moment and said solemnly. It's not that I don't understand, just that I understand a little bit. From Li Ang's swordsmanship, he saw what his swordsmanship lacked, but he only captured the traces of traces, and he couldn't see it thoroughly at all. Continue. Li Ang laughed and asked. Come again. Hawkeye clenched Hideoye's hilt tightly with both hands, and shouted with a stern expression. After he finished speaking, he slowly raised the black knife and chopped it down swiftly. Call out. A bright light pierced the air and approached Li Ang. At the same time as 367, his figure disappeared very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at Li Ang's side, and the black sword knight slid past. Boom. Li Ang held the first-generation goosh with one hand, and he slashed across it, not only dissipating the slash, but also the eagle eye, which was also affected by his power. Turn defense into attack. This trick is quite subtle. Hawkeye's pupils shrank, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back, trying to distance himself from Li Ang. However, Li Ang's knife had already arrived in front of him, and he had to use his swordsmanship to collide with Li Ang. Boom, boom, boom. The crisp and pleasant collision brought bursts of fire, which were very dazzling. Even under the scorching sunlight, this burst of sparks could not be concealed. The people around them stared at the battle between the two, swallowing their saliva and feeling surging. At this time, Warring States also arrived at the scene of the battle, seeing Hawkeye, who was unilaterally suppressed and quickly defeated in less than 10 seconds, his mood was very complicated. The world's largest swordsman and the second largest swordsman are too far apart. Sengoku took a deep breath and said slowly. First and second, the difference is too much. Although it is only a EPUB ranking difference, the gap in strength is too far away. Obviously, Hawkeye is not Li Ang's opponent at all, and it is quite difficult to even support 10 seconds. It can be called the master of swordsmanship. The corners of the warring state's mouth moved slightly, and he said with admiration on his face. The other side. The three generals looked at the battlefield in front of them, expressionless, their eyes flashing with heavy pressure. Liang's strength is beyond their imagination. Holding Liang, who held the first generation of ghosts, they could feel that it was far stronger than when they met them. Chapter 348-Swordmaster. Holding Liang, who held the first generation of ghosts, they could feel that it was far stronger than when they met them. He's not using his full strength, I can feel it. Qing Pheasant's face was serious, staring at Liang intently, said. Yeah, without exerting all his strength, he suppressed Hawkeye to such a degree. Hawkeye couldn't even hold for 15 seconds in front of him who didn't exert his strength. Akainu exhaled heavily, unable to hide the heavy heart. Facing an enemy like Liang can be described as their nightmare. Fortunately, Liang has already shaken hands with the Navy headquarters to make peace, otherwise, I'm afraid that this person will make Malin Fanduo uneasy. Kazuna, what do you think? Aokiji looked at Kizaru and asked. As we all know, Kizaru is also good at swordsmanship, and the level of swordsmanship is not low. It can compete with Rayleigh, the king of the underworld. Even if it is slightly inferior, it is not much different. I see. Huang Yuan looked at Liang in front of him with a dignified face, shook his head and said solemnly, I can't see through. His swordsmanship is so superb, I can understand a thing or two with eagle eyes. But his changes are so varied that it is impossible to infer at all. Quote. This is also the main reason why he can suppress Hawkeye with pure swordsmanship. His swordsmanship is too strong, and it can change in an instant, making Hawkeye unable to predict any of the opponent's moves. That's why Hawkeye was defeated so quickly. The world's greatest swordsman. Aokiji and Akainu looked inexplicable and sighed with emotion. Really? The title of the world's greatest swordsman is not just a false name. It's just that when Eagle Eye fought against Liang still didn't have such terrifying strength. But now, after holding a supremely fast knife in his hand, his strength has doubled. At this moment, without using all his strength, he can make Hawkeye doubt his life. You say, if you ask him to train those new recruits in our navy. How will it work? Aokiji's eyes twinkled and suggested. Absolutely not. Akainu raised his brows and directly vetoed, how can we allow such wicked people to teach us about our navy? If he misleads our navy's teaching, who will bear the consequences? Okay. Aokiji waved his hand helplessly, and he could also imagine that Akainu's reaction would be very violent, just a little suggestion, not really going to implement it. If it is really to be implemented, there will be many difficulties and obstacles. Not to mention the Navy side, even if the Navy agrees, Liang may not agree to teach them that the time of the world's greatest swordsman is not wasted for them. This knife is so powerful, can it still be used like this? My God, I just thought that Hawkeye was about to win. I didn't expect that Liang just deliberately showed weakness, took the opportunity to catch Hawkeye's eagerness for quick success, and then launched a fierce attack, and within 3 seconds, he was defeated. Hawkeye. It can be seen that in terms of tactics and strategy, Liang is countless times better than Hawkeye. Quote. Many navies were boiling, looking at Liang in front of him, full of admiration, said. They can't hide their respect for the strong. Moreover, it is a man like Liang who has completely abused Chiwahai's eagle eyes. This kind of recognition is rare. In this world, I am afraid that there is only one person. In addition, no one can be like him. When he fights against Hawkeye in swordsmanship, he seems to be at ease, and, if he can keep it for 15 seconds, he will definitely defeat Hawkeye. Cough cough. Hawkeye coughed, tired. He went all out, and when his mental power was highly concentrated, his physical strength was also very fast. At the same time, he also forgot the passage of time around him. Only Liang was left in his eyes, and all he thought about was how to delay the time to half a minute. The current him, the highest record, can only be supported by Li Ang's hands for 14 seconds. Not even for 15 seconds. And half a minute, for him, is a huge milestone, and it is also a task that he needs to work hard to complete. It's a pity that Li Ang didn't show mercy, so he had no chance to remain unbeaten for 30 seconds. Chapter 349 _ The day when Hawkeye was abused. Aren't you coming yet? Li Ang held the first-generation Goosh with one hand and smiled faintly. It's basically been a few hours now. He didn't feel tired, but it was hard to say whether the eagle eyes in front of him were tired. To attack him, under such a strong attack, physical strength is naturally exhausted very quickly. And Li Ang, he just dealt with it calmly throughout the whole process. He didn't take it seriously. How could he be tired? In addition, his physical strength is already at the limit. The word tired does not exist in his dictionary. Come on. Hawkeye was panting, his face flushed slightly, but he still nodded and said. He held the black knife in both hands and took the initiative to attack. Boom, boom, boom. The two knives collided, and a terrifying airflow erupted, sweeping the audience. The surrounding Navy crowd involuntarily retreated more than 10 meters, expanding the circle of the battlefield again, and trying to avoid unnecessary accidental injuries. After half an hour, Hawkeye was lying on the ground, his whole body was weak, he Daoye submerged into the ground, his forehead was covered with sweat, and his whole face was full of exhaustion. He collapsed, completely exhausted. Now he even has a problem standing up. As for Li Ang, he was still standing beside Hawkeye, his face was not blushing or panting, he couldn't see any feeling of tiredness, but he was full of energy. What a monster you are! Hawkeye coughed, his throat rolled, his voice hoarse, and said. Complimented. Li Ang smiled, and there was not much fluctuation in his expression. The surrounding Navy looked at the sharp contrast between the two and was amazed. Mr. Li Ang's physical strength is also monster level. Have you counted these few hours? Hawkeye's death has reached nearly 1,000 times. My God, has Hawkeye been killed nearly 1,000 times in such a short period of time? Li Ang's strength is really terrifying. ... Everyone was boiling, looking at the battlefield in front of them with shock, their lips trembling. In a few minutes, Mahawk, the eagle-eyed Mahawk with the top combat power of Chihuahua, was killed nearly 1,000 times in Li Ang's hands. This number is really terrifying. Except for Li Ang, no one in this world can do such a feat. Not far away, Warring States faced the Navy beside him and said solemnly, record this record in the Navy. I think this record should be unprecedented in history, never before and never since. Yes, Marshal. The Navy soldier nodded quickly and said. In a few hours, he killed Chihuahua nearly 1,000 times. Such a record was definitely the first time he had appeared. This is the first time everyone has heard that there is such a powerful existence in this world. This is Chihuahua, not some kind of cat or dog. The combat power of Chihuahua is recognized as having dominance in the sea. Each Chihuahua represents a terrifying powerhouse. However, even such a strong man is still vulnerable in front of Li Ang. Let's go. The three generals took one last look at Hawkeye lying on the ground, fell silent for a while, and then gradually left. Li Ang's strength gave them a strong pressure. The current Li Ang is even more dangerous than the original Li Ang. With the end of the battle, the surrounding navies also left one after another, and they went into the training with excitement, looking forward to one day, they can be like Li Ang. After watching the battle between Li Ang and Hawkeye, many people also developed a desire to practice swordsmanship, and everyone is working hard to hone their swordsmanship. It's a pity that they are only hot-headed for a while. In the end, very few people can persevere. Chapter 349 _ The days when Hawkeye was abused. In the end, very few people can persevere. Inside the field, Li Ang stood beside Hawkeye and asked with a smile, your swordsmanship has improved, although it's not very obvious. However, For a person of your level, a little improvement is already a big leap. Sexual progress. Quote. It's just that compared to you, it's still far behind. Hawkeye sighed helplessly, very sad, said. He lay on the ground, feeling the coldness of his back, and looked up at the blue sky. Compared to me. Liang laughed and shook his head. If your goal is me, then you have to work hard. According to this progress, you will improve your strength a little bit every day. Maybe, in 100 years, you will have a chance to fight me. Bar. Do you hit people like that? Hawkeye smiled bitterly. That's the truth. Liang waved his hand and said casually, have a rest, we will continue tomorrow. I will go first. Goodbye. Hawkeye looked at the back of Liang's departure, and also struggled to support his body, carrying heavy steps and returning to his residence step by step. This battle really made him feel a little indescribably tired. However, he has not felt so tired for many years. Since he became the world's largest swordsman, even if he played against the red hair, he was not as tired as it is today. Liang. I will surpass you. Hawkeye's eyes were filled with firm will, thinking in his heart. It's just that when he thinks of the terrifying strength of the other party, he has a deep sense of powerlessness in his heart, and it is easier said than done. If nothing else, as Liang said, he has to work hard for 100 years before he has the chance to fight the opponent, not win. It took 100 years of hard work to have the strength to fight, which was too frustrating for him. The other side. After Liang left the playground, he took Hancock's little hand and returned to the house. And then, Liang ignored Hancock's objections, and did some shameful things directly. There was no sign of overdrafting his physical strength at all, and he was still alive and well. In the end, it was after Hancock begged for mercy that Liang ended the fight. The next day. As always, Hawkeye stood at the gate on time, waiting for Liang to appear. Crunch. The door opens. Liang, wearing a black shirt and holding the first generation of Goosh, walked out step by step, looked at the eagle eye in front of him, and said, let's go to the playground. Good. Hawkeye nodded solemnly and said. Today, he has a lot of confidence in his own strength. Since returning to his residence yesterday, he has been thinking about the gains of the battle. Finally, let him raise his level of swordsmanship again. Therefore, he is very confident today that he can support Liang for more than 30 seconds. The two came to the playground, and the navy here gathered again. After half an hour, Hawkeye's lips trembled, and he looked at his hands in disbelief, and He Daoye was shot flying again. And in this half an hour, the time he supported, likewise, did not exceed 15 seconds. The level of swordsmanship performed by Liang is still only 40%. Next. Hawkeye is about to face the day of being abused by Liang. Chapter 350-Beast Pirates. Time flies by. There is still one day left for Ace's execution. This day. In the sea area of the New World, the sea surface is turbulent, surging and rolling, raising bursts of waves, overwhelming the sky, and the sea surface is rippling with ripples. The blue sea is endless, and the sea is flashing with golden light. A huge ship sails here. At a glance, on the flag above, there is a skull with a white beard. Whitebeard pirates. They have not really entered the Great Channel yet. Today, even the day they set sail. On the deck, Whitebeard's face was expressionless, with a heavy pressure on his body. Looking at the sea in front of him, his eyes shone brightly, with the same faith as always. Daddy. Beside Whitebeard, the captain of the first team, Marco, the captain of the third team, Drill, 470 inches Shichauzi, the captain of the fifth team, Foil Bista, and others, looked at Whitebeard and said respectfully. Go. Whitebeard's eyes flashed, and his voice was loud and rough, sending it around. Oh, Ace. Here we are. A group of people shouted loudly. The Moby Dick sailed in the direction of the Great Passage. At the same time, in the sea thousands of meters away, A pirate ship gradually sailed towards the location of the Whitebeard pirates. The person standing on the deck was a burly man, tall and burly, with black hair and a shawl, with a pair of horns, a long beard like a dragon's beard on his mouth, and a scale tattoo on his left arm. The upper body is naked, with a purple shirt hanging from the waist, and the lower body is wearing dark green wide trousers with a beaded rope tied around the waist. Like an ancient demon. Beast Kaido. He looked at the sea in front of him and asked in a deep voice, "Is the news accurate?" "Boss, it's 100% accurate. Whitebeard and his party are just ahead, preparing to rush to the Great Waterway. Are we sure we want to block it?" Beside Kaido, stood an equally strong man, tied with a ponytail and 2 braids, with a strong physique, a metal jaw on his mouth, and 2 ivory-shaped tusks on his head and shoulders. Decoration. He wears spiked rivets, wears a feather-like coat, and wields 2 sickle-shaped weapons. One of Kaido's 3 major disasters, Drought Jack. A bounty, a billion berry. On the whole ship, except for these 2, the rest of the people are ordinary little characters, standing in the corner of the ship, shivering, not daring to say a word. Of course. Kaido exhaled a hot breath from his nose, Lang Lang shouted. His eyes were fixed on the front, with a mighty fighting spirit on his body, like a rainbow. The goal of their trip was to stop the Whitebeard pirates. Naturally, they knew very well that the Whitebeard pirates were definitely going to save Ace, so they planned to stop Whitebeard one day earlier. As for the purpose. Anyway, the relationship between everyone is not friendly. Whoa. The sea raised waves of sea water, rolling continuously. The ship approached the position of the Moby Dick at a noticeable speed. It's getting close. I have to weigh the old man with Whitebeard. How much does he still have? Kaido couldn't hide his excitement and shouted. To be able to fight with Whitebeard, this is also a big wish of his. Although it was said that in the past, it was not that he had never fought with each other, but they all ended without a hitch, and the degree of collision was not very large. Chapter 350-100 Beast Pirates, and GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Although it was said that in the past, it was not that he had never fought with each other, but they all ended without a hitch, and the degree of collision was not very large. Boss, although Whitebeard is old, we can't be careless. Drought Jack thought for a moment and said. His head, like his own boss, is a reckless generation. However, in the face of the long-established Whitebeard, he had to be cautious. The shadow of the famous Tree of People, the name of Whitebeard has long traversed the seas of the New World. It's louder than Kaido's name. The world knows Whitebeard, but they don't know Kaido. This is the difference between Whitebeard and Kaido. You may not know Kaido, but you must know Whitebeard. The terrifying figure who once crossed the sea with Roger, such a person is definitely much more famous than Kai. So what? Kaido was expressionless, his expression was cold, and he said lightly. In battle, he never feared anyone. Otherwise, he would not have been seeking death for so many years. Boss. Suddenly, a younger brother, holding a telescope, hurried over and shouted. What's the matter? Drought Jack raised his brows, pulled the man directly, and asked. Kaido also looked at him, without any expression. His pure aura made this little brother almost wet his pants with fright, and slumped on the ground, his face full of fear. Trash. Kaido frowned and said coldly. Boss, I saw a pirate ship in the sea not far away. It seems that the target is us. Do you want to attack? The younger brother said quickly, for fear of being slapped to death by Kaido and thrown into the sea. Pirate ship. Kaido was a little surprised, his face became gloomy, and he said slowly, You know it's me, do you dare to come close? The people on this pirate ship are quite courageous. However, now my target is Whitebeard. Wait. Clean them up next time. No, boss, they're faster than us, and they'll meet soon. The little brother shook his head and said truthfully. Then we'll settle them all together. Kaido's face was calm and indifferent, he said. As one of the 4 emperors in the New World, he has such strength and confidence. Apart from the other 3 emperors, he is also a terrifying existence in the New World. No other pirates can shake his status. See who they are. Drought Jack also showed a cold smile and asked. Under such circumstances, there are still people who come to die. This is simply a warm-up for them. Yes. Before attacking the Whitebeard pirates, a group of people sent them to warm up, which is also a good 0.6 thing. It's not clear, because the 2 strings are so far apart that it's impossible to see any distinctive features on the vessel. The younger brother shook his head and told the truth. It was so far away that he could only see an ambiguous sense of direction. It can only be distinguished that the other party is driving in their direction, and there is no information such as the flag of the pirate ship and the personnel on board. In that case, we'll stay where we are, waiting for them to come. Kaido shouted without any emotion, if someone comes to die, then get rid of them. Yes, boss. The younger brother left quickly and asked the helmsman to stop the boat. The ship stayed in the area in the middle of the sea, and there was no trace of an island in all directions. And at the rear of the ship, a ship is gradually approaching at a terrifying speed. Chapter 341-Redhead, Give Me Face. Aboard the Beast Pirates. After the younger brother quickly instructed the helmsman to stop the sailing of the ship, he took out the telescope, stood on a high place, and looked at the sea in the distance, seeing the blurred ship gradually becoming clear. This is... The younger brother raised his brows, a little puzzled. He wiped his eyes, fixed his sight on the telescope again, and looked at the distant ship, which was constantly approaching. The whole picture of the ship is presented in his eyes, and the flag on the ship is also extremely dazzling. Wait. His eyes gradually enlarged, his throat was dry, and his entire face was full of shock. This ship turned out to be. It can't be wrong. He quickly rubbed his eyes again, only to realize that he was not wrong at all. This is a ship with a red like a dragon's head in front, 2 horns in 2 ways, a pattern of golden iron blocks below, a skull on the flag, and a few red scratches in the corner of the left eye. Seeing this, he didn't dare to stay any longer. Quickly, he jumped off the high platform, rolled around the deck in a very embarrassed manner, and hurriedly walked towards Kaido's direction. He shouted loudly, "Boss Kaido, it's not good, it's not good. What happened to you at 17? Quote. Kaido glanced at the man, his face full of impatience, and shouted, "It's not normal to panic when you encounter small things. What a useless waste. Tell me, did you see that pirate ship?" Drought Jack also looked at the little brother with some dissatisfaction and shouted. Being so timid and hurried when encountering some things is simply too embarrassing for their pirates. In this sea, there is no one I need to fear. As my subordinate, you don't need to fear anyone, do you understand? Kaido looked at the younger brother earnestly and said coldly, "Say, what did you see?" I. The younger brother's words trembled a little, and he couldn't say a word completely. Speak. Drought Jack shouted loudly, and with a grumpy expression, he couldn't help but want to throw this little brother into the sea. This timid appearance made him too irritable. I saw it, the red hair pirates. The younger brother's lips trembled, and there was a bit of fear in his eyes, he said. Well. Kaido raised his brows, looked at the younger brother deeply, and asked again, "You said, who did you see?" "The red hair pirates. The ones following us are the red hair pirates." The younger brother swallowed his saliva and told the truth. Red hair. Kaido's face gradually became solemn and serious. Aside. Even Drought Jack was a little afraid, and his eyes flashed a little unnaturally. The collision between the 4 emperors happens every day. It's not that Jack Drought didn't fight the redhead, but he was beaten quite badly in the end. It was him who was full of confidence back then and challenged the red hair pirates alone. The end result was a fiasco. If it wasn't for Lin's tenaciousness, I'm afraid, that battle would cost him his life. Is he going to stop me? Kaido was expressionless, walked to the fence, looked ahead, and muttered to himself. In his sight, he soon saw a pirate ship, which was gradually approaching. On the deck, a middle-aged man with red hair, with a knife on his waist, is very conspicuous. Moreover, the other party was also watching, and Kaido looked at each other. It's really him. Kaido's mouth moved slightly and said slowly. The chance of the meeting between the four emperors and the four emperors is not high, but no one is afraid of anyone saying that. Chapter 341-red hair, give me a face. The chance of the meeting between the four emperors and the four emperors is not high, but no one is afraid of anyone saying that. Everyone is the four emperors, and the gap in strength is not very big. If a battle breaks out, there will be no results in a short period of time. Whoa! The ocean current rolled, and the red-haired pirate ship arrived directly next to the pirate ship Kaido. People on both sides, look at each other. On the red-haired pirate ship, the red-haired Shanks was looking at Kaido. Beside him, the deputy captain Ben Beckman, the sniper Jesus Bu, the cadre Reikalu, and others, all focused on Kaido and others. Redhead, what are you doing here? Kaido raised his brows and asked coldly. To prevent you from doing something out of the ordinary. The red-haired face was expressionless, holding a western sword in his hand and resting it on his shoulders, a terrifying overlord-like domineering looming out. This terrifying overlord domineering arrogance directly shook Kaido's shipboard to the point of cracking a trace. So strong. Behind Kaido, many pirates took a deep breath. This tyrannical color is too strong. It is too terrifying to be able to cause such terrifying lethality to substantial objects. However, Kaido's expression remained unchanged, staring at the red hair, and said, "Are you going to fight?" "I personally don't want to fight you if I can. But if you go your way, then I'll have to do it, Kaido." The red-haired Shanks spoke plainly and bluntly. In order to stop Kaido from fighting Whitebeard and others, he had to come forward. The two fell into silence. Kaido glanced at Drought Jack and a group of waste boys behind him, and then looked at the red-haired position. The group of cadres who were ready to go also felt a little pressure in their hearts. Outnumbered. He can fight against the red hair alone, but if Jack is in the drought, he may be maimed. Ha 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 ha. Kaido laughed suddenly, his expression unchanged, and said, "I didn't expect that. I just wanted to do an ordinary thing, and it actually caused you to show up. Give me a face and stop it, Kaido." The terrifying overlord color on the red-haired body has not dissipated, said. "We withdraw." Kaido took a deep look at the red hair, waved his hand, and said. 577 is, boss. A group of younger brothers nodded quickly, controlled the direction, and gradually sailed away in the opposite direction. Red-haired pirates on board. The redhead looked at Kaido who was walking away, his eyes twinkling brightly, and he fell into contemplation. "Boss, shall we go?" Lajalu grabbed a piece of meat with his left hand, took a bite, and asked with a smile. "Go." The red hair nodded and ordered, "Go to the Great Channel." "Yes, boss." A group of younger brothers nodded quickly. Since then, the beast pirates have returned to the New World, while the red-haired pirates have returned from the New World to the Great Channel. He didn't want to participate in this battle. But, it's better to come out in the end. Otherwise, things will spiral out of control. The redhead said with a heavy heart. Hopefully, there won't be much changes. Otherwise, the impact on this sea area will be too great. Thinking of this, the shadow of Blackbeard Titch couldn't help but appear in his head. Immediately, he frowned and said solemnly, "Tiki, what is your purpose? What are you going to do?" His relationship with Blackbeard Tiki is too great. Whenever he thinks of Blackbeard Tiki, he can't help but wipe the scar at the corner of his eyes. His face is expressionless, and his eyes are staring at the sea in front of him. This injury was left to him by the other party. Chapter 352-Lively Sea Area. Great Fairway. The blue sea is rippling. Pirate ships sailed in this sea area with great fanfare, without any fear of the navy at all. Father Whitebeard ordered, "Let us gather to go to Marin Vando. Damn Navy, dare to capture Ace, we must rescue Ace. Save Ace, save Ace." Quote. The large and small pirate ships under the command of the Whitebeard pirates headed towards the sea area of Marin Vando one after another. The momentum is mighty, all the way rampant. Some pirate ships around had to give in 3 points whenever they encountered them. These people are all pirates under the Whitebeard pirates. Let's step back. We can't afford to offend them. The captain of a pirate ship said with a heavy face. Looking at the pirate ships sailing in front of them, they chose to back down. The influence of Whitebeard has always been terrifying. In the New World, he rules a sea area, and in the Great Waterway, there is also a glorious past that belongs to him. This is a giant of the same era as One Piece Roger. Although he is old now, the majesty that belongs to him has not disappeared. Of course. Some pirate ships did not choose to back down, but clashed with these people. The people under Whitebeard are amazing. I just look down on you people. Brothers, attack me, these guys have long been disliked by them. With the name of Whitebeard, bullying us people everywhere. Now, Whitebeard is going to save Ace, he has no time to take care of these guys. We can finally get our revenge. A pirate ship slammed into the group of pirate ships ahead. Fighting broke out on both sides. Boom. The sound of artillery resounded through the sky, and the explosion sounded like thunder, causing a buzzing in people's ears. Kill. The battle between pirates and pirates broke out. Now Whitebeard has no time to take care of his subordinates, which is why these pirates dare to act recklessly. The anger they have suppressed for a long time can finally be vented. These people, who relied on themselves to be pirates under Whitebeard's command, were occasionally oppressed on weekdays, so that they did not dare to resist in the past. Now they don't need to worry about anything anymore. Whitebeard is going to collide with the naval headquarters, and he has no ability to govern their petty troubles. It is precisely because of this that they dare to vent their inner anger. Otherwise, you should endure it, and you have to endure it. Little ones, these damned guys dare to provoke us, they are trying to stop us from saving Ace. Let me do it all and kill them all tilde. They are too arrogant. They know that we are under the command of the white-bearded father, and they dare to do something to us. This shows that they do not take the white-bearded father in their eyes. Go on, kill them all. Quote. A group of pirates shouted loudly, armed with knives, guns and other weapons, stepped out in one step, boarded other people's boats, and killed. The battle is imminent. Boom. The sound of the cannon spread out at any time, bringing bursts of fire. The ship is burnt and sinking to the bottom of the sea. A pirate with a face full of fear, shouted loudly. In a blink of an eye. Under the siege of more than a dozen ships such as the Whitebeard pirate ship, a ship sank to the bottom of the sea in an instant, and the group of pirates were also killed by their joint efforts. Look around. One after another pirate ships gradually approached, and some pirate ships couldn't help it and launched an attack. Chapter 342-Lively Sea Area. One after another pirate ships gradually approached, and some pirate ships couldn't help it and launched an attack. Their hearts, which had been suppressed for a long time, burst out. Kill. Loud and loud, fighting together. Some of their arms were cut off, and some of their heads were directly cut off, turning them into headless corpses. Ah, my legs. A pirate looked at the thigh that he had lacked, his eyes filled with fear, and shouted. Puff. A knife stabbed into his heart, taking his life. The pirate who killed him laughed wildly, vulnerable waste. Puff. Another knife pierced through his back, his eyes were dull, looking at the blood hole in his chest, he couldn't believe it. The look of the eyes gradually disappeared, and there was no vitality, and he died on the spot. The battle between pirates and pirates can be described as quite intense. The icy corpses piled up into mountains, and the blood flowed down the deck from the deck to the sea, dyeing the sea water in the vicinity red. But soon, with the scouring of the sea and the current, the bright red color gradually faded, and see you again, all disappeared without a trace. The arms that were cut off fell into the sea. A terrifying sea king emerged from the sea and opened its fangs. Ow! All the corpses were swallowed by it. Immediately, it turned its gaze to a group of humans on the boat, a pair of scarlet eyes with greedy emotional fluctuations, roared loudly, and collided with the ship ahead with its terrifying body of more than 10 meters. Quote. Ah, sea kings, sea kings. No, please help me, I don't want to fall. The boat is about to capsize, everyone jump off the boat. But you have to die when you jump off the boat. I don't want to die yet. Quote. A group of pirates were terrified, looking at the ship that was about to capsize, their faces couldn't hide the fear. Ah! After a burst of shouting, many pirates still fell to the sea, and then they were slammed by the sea kings and swallowed directly into their stomachs, even the corpses were gone. Come on! A pirate captain's eyes popped, and he quickly shouted. Immediately, the pirate ship here quickly fled. As for the pirates on the pirate ship that is about to be overturned, it is sad. They wanted to cry without tears, and tightly grab the wooden bars of the fence to keep themselves from falling into the sea. Looking at the huge scarlet eyes on the sea below, their legs suddenly became weak. Ow! Okay, the sea king roared, and with that hard head, he directly bumped the overturned ship again, and the overturning speed of the ship accelerated. Boom! Suddenly, the whole ship turned over, and everyone on board fell into the sea. This time, it was the turn of the sea kings, and it rushed towards it quickly. A famous pirate was in the sea, his face flushed, gurgling drinking the sea water, his eyes looking at the pair of scarlet eyes, the terrifying shape of the sea king, his face showed a look of fear. Escape, escape. All the consensus in the heart, sliding the sea with both hands, launched a frantic escape. But in the sea, how could their speed be comparable to the speed of the sea kings? I see. The sea kings jumped at once, opened their fangs, and swallowed all these little human beings in their eyes, and ate them all. After all the humans here were eaten, it slowly left this sea area with no end in sight. Chapter 353 _ the naval headquarters before the decisive battle. The golden sun shines down. Blue sky, white clouds fluttering in the wind. Navy headquarters. Marin Vando. Drink. Drink. A group of navies are training hard on the playground, their foreheads are covered with sweat, they still haven't stopped their movements, and they are very firm in carrying out their training. In addition to facing the upcoming battle, their mood was, in fact, very nervous. The best way to get rid of stress is to burn yourself out. After today's training has reached the limit, tomorrow will be to recharge and wait for the moment when the war breaks out. Area not far away. Garp looked at the Navy who was training hard in front of him, his expression was inexplicable, with a bit of sadness, but he shook his head and sighed, secretly hurting himself. On the one hand, it is his belief that he has insisted on for many years. On the one hand, it is the grandson he brought up with his own hands. Either way, he couldn't decide. Ace, I made you a navy long ago. But you just don't listen. The corners of Carp's mouth moved slightly, looking at the blue sea in front of him. The old face was no longer young, but was wrinkled and looked a little old. The white-haired person sends the black-haired person. 353 This kind of feeling is not good. However, he is a navy, he is a vice admiral, he cannot do anything to the navy headquarters. What do you want me to do? Carp's lips moved slightly, hesitating in his heart, and there was no way out. He is too tired. Hard to choose between. Finally. He sighed heavily, retracted his gaze, moved his footsteps, and gradually left here. Looking at his back, for a while, it seems that people can see the sunset, the kind of old age, tired, and everything will end. Cap. Suddenly, a voice called out to Carp. Carp's body stiffened, he turned his head, looked at his old comrade in arms, forced a smile, and said, "Are you here? I don't worry about your character. Sengoku said with an expressionless face. I won't do it. If I want to do it, I have already done it. Why wait until I haven't done anything for a long time? So, don't worry. Carp laughed at himself. What naval hero? What lieutenant general? In the end, he couldn't even protect his grandson. Sengoku was silent, watching Garp drift away. He could understand the mood of his old comrade in arms. This feeling is not good. On the one hand, it is his firm belief. Because of his belief, it is naturally impossible to help the pirates escape the capture of the navy. And if you can't help but watch your grandson be executed, that picture is really unacceptable. How heart-piercing. Cap. Warring States whispered to himself, shook his head helplessly, sighed, and left here. The huge naval headquarters is preparing for the outbreak of the war tomorrow. There is less than a day left until Ace's execution. Tomorrow, even when Ace is executed. Thought here. The Warring States' face gradually became firm, without any emotion. At this moment, he was a naval marshal. It is his duty to execute Ace and fight against the arrogance of pirates. No matter who it is, don't ask him to perform this task. The Whitebeard pirates will definitely come, but they are still fearless. He wants everyone in the world to understand the ability of the Navy and the cowardice of pirates. Chapter 353 _ The Navy Headquarters before the decisive battle. He wants everyone in the world to understand the ability of the Navy and the cowardice of pirates. Whitebeard, I'm waiting for you. Warring States' eyes twinkled, thinking in his heart. He moved his footsteps and gradually left here. Sunset. The shadow of the person was gradually elongated, and the position of the playground, a group of training people, was driven away by the instructor. Give me back to recharge well and wait for tomorrow's battle. The instructor looked serious and shouted loudly. Yes, instructor. A group of Navy soldiers answered in unison, their voices loud and clear. It's just that when they think about the battle with the Whitebeard pirates tomorrow, their mood is very surging. You know, this is the Whitebeard pirates, the terrifying sea overlord who once stood on an equal footing with the pirate King Roger, Whitebeard Edward Newgate. Many navies are still very uneasy in their hearts, but during this time, the people on the Navy have also instilled a lot of beliefs, allowing them to maintain a little confidence without much influence. Without these beliefs, they would have been crushed long ago. When the two armies are fighting, in terms of momentum, naturally they cannot lose. Many navies gradually left, and some people were still nervously talking about tomorrow's decisive battle on the way. Hopefully, I can survive tomorrow. Don't worry, there is me. As long as you don't get too far away from me, I can save you. Besides, we have 3 generals here, as well as Chiwahai. But I'm still a little worried. After all, the opponent is the Whitebeard. So what? Don't worry, Whitebeard, there are naturally 3 generals to contend with. We don't need to worry about these things. We just need to kill the pirates ahead. That level of battle is not something we can participate in. Quote. A group of pirates gradually returned to their residence. Tomorrow's decisive battle is coming. All of them are completely sleepless today. On the eve of the battle, there are too few people who can still maintain a good state. Even the Lieutenant General of the Navy headquarters may not be able to maintain a good attitude. In addition, people with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, Major General, etc. have also rushed to the naval headquarters. At this time, all the forces that can be used must be concentrated in the naval headquarters to face the Great War of tomorrow. Office of the Marshal. Warring States tightly held the information conveyed in his hand, frowned, and fell into contemplation. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Come in. Warring States put down the information in his hand, relieved his mood a little, and said calmly. Crunch. After the door opened, a man in a Navy uniform walked in. It turned out to be Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel. Flying Squirrel, are you recovering? Sengoku's eyes flashed and he asked with a smile. Yes, Marshal, tomorrow, I can fight. The flying squirrel had a firm expression, nodded slowly, and said, "Good." Warring States nodded and laughed. Since there is a lieutenant general's combat power, it must not be ignored. At this moment, the flying squirrel suddenly saw the information on the desktop of the Warring States. His face changed slightly, and he whispered, "Marshal of the Warring States, who is the one on your desktop? That group of pirates can't bear it anymore." Warring States' eyes narrowed slightly, flashing cold light, said. The information he held in his hand was naturally a recent message from the group of pirates belonging to the Whitebeard Pirates, making waves in the ocean and swearing to go to Marin Vando. "But it's just a mob, there's no need to worry." Warring States waved his hand and said directly, "It's you, how is your injury recovery?" "Almost healed." Chapter 354 Arrogant and Domineering Little Tina. The sunset is infinitely good, but it is only near dusk. Li Ang stood by the window, looking at the burning clouds in the sky, with his arms around Hancock's slender waist, his chin resting on the latter's shoulders. "Tomorrow, even if there is a decisive battle." Hancock's beautiful eyes carried a certain look, and said softly, "Yeah, but this is just a battle between the Navy and pirates, and it has little to do with you." "It has nothing to do with me, it's also not much," Li Ang said slowly with a smile on his face. "Yeah." Hancock leaned back with his entire body, his soft body was thrown into Li Ang's arms, and his delicate face was flushed red, which was truly charming. Li Ang hugged Hancock, felt the soft touch, narrowed his eyes slightly, felt it carefully, and did not speak. Neither of them spoke, just felt the quiet atmosphere. But this atmosphere was soon broken. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. "It's Hawkeye again." Li Ang shook his head helplessly and said, "Go quickly." Hancock smiled sweetly, pecked on Li Ang's face, and left quickly, walking into his room like a frightened bunny. Looking at the back of Hancock leaving, Li Ang rubbed the place where he had been kissed, his eyes gradually softened, the corners of his mouth curled up, and he laughed. Soon after he opened the door, the person he saw, as expected, was Hawkeye. "Mr. Li Ang." Hawkeye's attitude is very correct, looking at Li Ang, respectfully. He has respected Li Ang as his good teacher and friend, and being able to exchange swordsmanship with Li Ang has benefited him a lot. Therefore, as long as he is free, he will come to disturb Li Ang and seek to improve his swordsmanship. This made Li Ang a little helpless. If he had known this, he should not have agreed to the swordsmanship practice of this fellow Hawkeye. "What's the matter?" Li Ang waved his hand and said helplessly. "It's nothing, just in swordsmanship, I have some questions I want to ask you." Hawkeye took a deep breath and said flatly. He didn't feel ashamed to advise Li Ang, on the contrary, he wished he had more things to ask Li Ang. After this village, there is no such shop. Once the war is over, if he wants to ask Li Ang for advice, he has no chance. Therefore, taking advantage of the opportunity now, he must ask Li Ang thoroughly about many things, which will help him improve his swordsmanship. In terms of swordsmanship, his attitude has always been quite serious. This is also the main reason why Li Ang is willing to guide Du Ang. "Where? Talk as you walk." Li Ang looked calm, looked at the open lawn in front of him, and said slowly, "Good." After Hawkeye nodded, he followed Li Ang's footsteps and walked forward step by step. The Navy headquarters at dusk had a golden splendor. The surroundings of the building seemed to be shrouded in golden light, and the entire Navy headquarters had red and gold colors. It makes people feel very warm, but also has a warm feeling. But this warmth will soon be broken. "Go ahead." Li Ang walked around the area of Marin Vando with eagle eyes and said actively. Unless it is a special area where they are not allowed to enter, they can still come and go at any time in general environmental places. This is the privilege of Eagle Eye Chihuahua. As for Li Ang, everyone could only choose to turn a blind eye. If this monster were to break in hard, no one would be able to stop Malin Fando. Simply, it is better to pretend not to know and let the other party move around here. Chapter 354 Arrogant and Domineering Little Tina, and GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. If this monster were to break in hard, no one would be able to stop Malin Fando. Simply, it is better to pretend not to know and let the other party move around here. It's just. Eagle Eye suddenly threw out the doubts in his heart, and looked at Liang with a bit of admiration and compliment. The deeper the contact with Liang, the more intense his admiration for Liang. Liang's understanding of swordsmanship is too deep. Therefore, he didn't ask Liang to discuss for a while, but kept asking a lot of esoteric questions. The answer Liang gave was quite spiritual. Although he couldn't understand it in a short time, after going back and thinking about it, he came up with the deep meaning of Liang's words, which shocked him. It can only be said that Liang's understanding of swordsmanship is already quite perfect and very thorough, so that he can tell him these extremely mysterious words, but there are many insights. After half an hour, Hawkeye left in a hurry. Liang was left alone, still walking around the area at will. Looking at the back of Hawkeye's departure, Liang looked very helpless, but he had to admit that Hawkeye's talent in the field of swordsmanship was quite tyrannical. If it weren't for his modifiers, I'm afraid it would be really difficult to compare with Hawkeye. However, in this world, it does not mean that hard work will be the strongest. I can only say that working hard can ensure that I will not be weak, but it does not mean that I will become the strongest. Looking at it now, I am simply the son of God. The corners of Liang's mouth were slightly raised, and he smiled lightly. Without any training and effort, he can obtain power that others can't get in his entire life. This is his unique ability. The sun is gradually going down. And the sky also pulled up a layer of night. The curved crescent moon exudes a layer of white halo, bringing a cool air. The breeze was blowing, and the temperature was icy cold, without any warmth. Late at night. The lights of the Navy headquarters are always bright, and many places are still carrying out tasks, and others are unable to sleep and walk around here casually. Liang joined the ranks of the walk, because it was too dark, so few people could see his face, which did not cause unnecessary trouble. Ellipsis. The Navy headquarters at night sounds beautiful. Liang raised his head and stood on the spot, looking at the towering buildings not far away, and the bright rays of light, which really made him feel a little emotional. Ouch! At this moment, a crisp voice appeared. And Liang only felt that a soft thing in his arms slammed into it directly, and he subconsciously stretched out his hands involuntarily. What? Liang's hands stopped abruptly, as if he was holding two balls of soft things in his hands. He squeezed involuntarily. Ah, rogue! A woman's voice appeared, full of anger. She quickly distanced herself from Liang. Her delicate face was full of anger, and she stared at Liang. In this dim light, Liang could also see the face of this person a little bit clearly. She has sassy pastel pink mid-parted long hair and purple lens sunglasses on her head. Her attire is a rose-red business suit and a navy shawl of justice. The color of her gloves is also dark purple. At this moment, she was blocking Yu Hung with her hands. Mei Mu was furious, her delicate pretty face was chilled, she bit her silver teeth and gave Liang a vicious look. Admiralty Colonel, Tina. Say, did you do it on purpose? Tina was very arrogant and angry, and asked Liang. At the same time, her pretty face also had a bit of ruddy blood, coupled with delicate facial features, white squeezed in, wearing a navy uniform, and tall. She is even more charming at night. It was the first time she had been touched there when she grew up so big. This really made her so angry. Chapter 355 Who gets into whose trap? Recalling that just now, she was pinched there by a man, her pretty face turned crimson. It was hard to tell, and at the same time, she was very angry, and she wanted to strip the person in front of her alive. Say, did you do it on purpose? Tina gritted her silver teeth, looked at the man in front of her motionless, and asked again. She was very angry, although she bumped into the other party herself, who knew that the other party deliberately reached out to hold her there, which was really embarrassing. At this time, facing the angry Tina, Li-Ang was also happy and said with a smile, "I'm also wondering, standing on the side of the road, someone actually bumped up on the road, and even took the initiative to hug. I was almost terrified before subconsciously use your hands to block it." Quote. "Who knows, I've bumped into something that shouldn't be touched." Li-Ang waved his hand and said very innocently. "You." Tina's beautiful eyes widened, she glared at Li-Ang, and shouted, "You bastard, you dare not admit it. I clearly saw that you stretched out your hand on purpose, but you still want to deny it, right?" "I didn't deny it, I really did it subconsciously. Besides, you suddenly bumped into it, how would I know it? If you want me to say, you have half the reason." Li-Ang said with a smile. "Well, you kid, in front of me, you took advantage of me and wanted to slander me. You wait for me, I want to make you look good." 193 Tina gritted her teeth, her beautiful eyes were round, and she stared at Li-Ang, wishing to slash the other party with 1,000 swords. Obviously, it was her who suffered. But being beaten up by Li-Ang, how could she not be angry? Of course. She subconsciously ignored it. If she didn't bump into Li-Ang suddenly, wouldn't there be nothing? But now that she is full of anger, how can she calm down and think? We've got to be reasonable, okay? Li-Ang looked at Tina's angry and cute appearance, couldn't help but continued to tease the other party and laughed. Reasonable. Tina became even more angry and shouted, "I'll let you reason now, do you know who I am? Which branch do you belong to? Even I don't know. I really don't know." Li-Ang smiled and said bluntly. "Okay." Tina was stunned for a moment, and after reacting, she thought that Li-Ang was deliberately playing tricks on her. Immediately, her mood fluctuated violently, and her originally magnificent figure was even more surging in front of Li-Ang. Especially the clothes she was wearing showed deep grooves, and Li-Ang couldn't help but focus on the snow-white part of the other party. At this time, Tina also noticed Li-Ang's sight, looked back, and quickly stretched out her hand to block in front of her. Even more angry, shouted, "Well, you rascal, you dare to take advantage of me. Hey, please tell me some truth. I didn't touch you again, so why did I take advantage of you again?" Li-Ang laughed and said, "If this is taking advantage of you, then I'm taking advantage of the whole world. Besides, you looked at me, didn't you take advantage of me too? You eloquent boy, you are too arrogant. Today, I am going to teach you a profound lesson." Tina stopped arguing with Li-Ang, took a few steps back, and her angry face made her delicate facial features even more lovely. "Are you going to do something to me at the Navy headquarters? Colonel Tina, this is a bad act. If someone finds out, or if I report to it, then your punishment will be inevitable." Seeing Tina preparing to attack, Li-Ang deliberately made a panicked expression and said, You. Tina's posture ready to attack instantly withered, biting her pink lips and pointing at Li-Ang. The anger in her stomach had nowhere to vent. It is a felony to act without permission in Marin Van Do. Under Li-Ang's words, Tina didn't dare to act rashly. "Are you a man?" Tina gritted her teeth, looked at Li-Ang, and said, "If it's a man, just fight with me. If you lose, obediently admit your mistakes. Then apologize to me solemnly." "How? I'm a man, but I'm a man, so why should I fight with you? Logically, this question of yours is unreasonable." Chapter 355 Who Gets Into Whose Trap? And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 29 and GT. I'm a man, but I'm a man, so why should I fight with you? Logically, this question of yours is unreasonable. Li-Ang laughed and explained slowly. You. Tina was even more angry. Looking at Li-Ang's smile, she felt more aggrieved than eating mosquitoes, and shouted, "Anyway, in a word, do you want to fight?" BHFB. Since you've insisted so much, then I'll reluctantly win. But let's say in advance, what if I beat you? If I win, and there's no gain, then why should I fight you? Liang smiled and asked. If you win. Tina pondered for a while and said, then this matter, just pretend that nothing happened. It's that simple. That's fine, I'll just leave, nothing happened. Don't you dare to do anything to me without authorization. Liang waved his hand and said with a smile on his face. After he finished speaking, he moved his footsteps and was about to leave this place. As expected. Tina behind her made a frantic voice. Okay, I promise you, you won me, I admit that I was wrong just now, and I apologize to you, how about that? Immediately, Liang turned around, fixed on Tina's delicate face through the faint light, shook his head and smiled. The bet is too small, there is no motivation. Don't push yourself too far. Tina's beautiful eyes glared and shouted. If you want to bet bigger, do you dare to come? Liang walked to Tina's position step by step, a head taller than Tina, looked down and said. Why don't you dare? Liang's words directly brought Tina's competitive spirit. She slightly parted her pink lips and said, tell me, what are you betting on? Simple, bet on one of your conditions. Liang's eyes flashed, and when he saw that Tina was pregnant, his mood was self-evident. Then, Tina asked inexplicably, what conditions? I win, you promise me a condition. I lose, I promise you a condition. Plus what you said before, all is a bet, what do you think? Liang smiled somewhat meaningfully, said. No problem. Without thinking, Tina agreed immediately. At the same time, in order to prevent Liang from repenting, she said again, okay, whoever loses will not admit it, the sky will be thundered, and it will not die. Is there a thunderclap in the sky? Good. No problem. Liang looked at Tina with a slightly amused look and nodded. At my current level, even if I am hit by 5 thunderbolts, I will not necessarily die. However, since the little girl Tina said so, she must agree. Anyway, he won't lose. At this time. After hearing Liang's promised words, Tina's delicate and pretty face finally showed a long-lost smile. The smile was very strange, and her beautiful eyes looked at Liang with a certain look. She sneered and said maliciously, you are really out of your mind, and you actually agreed to bet with me. This time, even if you want to go back on it, you can't go back on it. Feel the pain. Enjoy. Speak without your head. You're probably talking about yourself. Liang couldn't help laughing. Seeing Tina's confident look, he wanted to laugh. Who was in whose trap? I'm afraid, Tina, a simple little girl, is still in the dark, thinking that she has won. As everyone knows, she has completely entered Liang's trap. Chapter 356 You are cheating. Now you're still using your tongue, I don't know what it means. Tina sneered and didn't take Liang's words to heart at all. Anyway, in her eyes, Liang is definitely not her opponent. Come on, let me see how much you have. Liang laughed dumbly, looking at the confident appearance of Tina, the little girl. He really couldn't bear to destroy the other party's self-confidence in his own strength. However, if Tina wants to defeat him, even if she trains for thousands of years, there is no possibility. Huh. Tina snorted coldly, looking at Liang's smiling face. She felt very aggrieved. Involuntarily, she remembered the scene of being suddenly attacked just now, and the embarrassing scene of being pinched there. With a swish, her pretty face turned red. I'll kill you, you bloody rascal. Tina's face was blushing, and she quickly rushed to Liang's position, punching and kicking directly. This picture made Liang a little stunned. What's going on? Liang looked at Tina who was punching and kicking in front of him. It didn't hurt at all, and the whole person was stunned. A long time. Tina seemed to vent the anger in her heart a little. After realizing her actions, she took a few steps back calmly. She looked at Liang with a cold face and said, okay, let's start. Ladies first, please go first. Li Ang waved his hand and smiled calmly. That's what you said, don't regret it. Tina's beautiful eyes flashed, and she said with a narrow smile. No, you can do it anyway. Li Ang laughed, he really couldn't bear to let this little girl feel frustrated. Until now, the other party has not found any clues about him. I have to say that Tina's mind is still too simple. But it is pure and simple. That way, I can get a chance to do it. Moreover, it is also fortunate that I am quick, otherwise, if other people start early, I will have nothing to do. Li Ang thought to himself, his eyes flickered, and he felt fortunate in his heart. Well, I'm going to do it. Tina took a deep breath, her face was expressionless, her delicate pretty face was icy cold. Immediately, she used the palm of her hand to pull out iron railings and surrounded Li Ang, trying to trap Li Ang. She is a devil fruit person, someone who eats the fruit of the threshold. However, Li Ang remained motionless, and in the face of Tina's offensive, there was no sign of any movement at all. Well. Tina raised her brows, always feeling that things were a little weird. However, she had already caught Li Ang, and she smiled, you are finished. After she finished speaking, she manipulated the ability of the devil fruit to surround the iron fence and surrounded Li Ang. Li Ang's whole body was wrapped by the iron fence and folded heavily. The whole person was trapped by the iron fence and could not move. At least, in Tina's eyes, Li Ang was absolutely immobile. You lost. Tina walked in front of Li Ang and said lightly. I lost. Not necessarily. Li Ang showed a smile, his eyes fixed on Tina's delicate face, and said. Hearing this, Tina raised her brows and said coldly, can't you afford to lose? How can you continue to attack me now? You have been trapped by me. You mean, the scrap iron? Suddenly, Li Ang's hands gradually twisted. Immediately, Tina saw a picture that made her whole person terrified. I see. Li Ang struggled a little, and the iron bars on his body deformed and gradually became loose. He grabbed the black iron bars with both hands and tried hard. Chapter 356 _ You are cheating. And LT. 31 and GT. Li Ang struggled a little, and the iron bars on his body deformed and gradually became loose. He grabbed the black iron bars with both hands and tried hard. Click. The iron fence is broken. Just in Tina's sight, Li Ang grabbed the iron bar with both hands, tearing it apart. Intermittent iron bars fell to the ground. This. Tina's body was stiff, her red lips trembled, and she stared blankly at the iron bar on the ground made of her devil fruit, which was being torn by Li Ang. Totally unstoppable. The iron bars made by her devil fruit were torn apart in front of her face. This scene simply made her unforgettable in her life. If you're talking about these scrap irons, I'm sorry. It's too hard for these scrap irons to trap me. Li Ang patted his empty hands, smiled, and said. Under his gaze, Tina took a half step back in fear. She was wearing a dark red shirt and a pair of straight and slender long legs like chopsticks, slender without any excess fat. The red high-heeled shoes under her feet made her figure even taller, her pink hair was thrown on her back, and her glasses were pulled to her forehead. A pair of beautiful and moving big eyes, full of shock, deep shock. Question mark 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 question mark. Then who wins and who loses now? Li Ang moved his footsteps and gradually approached Tina's position, smiling. You. Tina's red lips trembled slightly, and she was involuntarily frightened away, pointing at Li Ang, feeling uneasy. Even though as a colonel, she has experienced countless battles, but she has never encountered such a terrible thing as today. Her devil fruit immediately failed. So that, in front of the enemy in front of him, it would be so easy to be torn apart. Ta-ta-ta. Li Ang's footsteps became louder and clearer in her ears. It looks like you lost. Not me. Li Ang walked in front of Tina and looked at Tina's delicate and flawless face up close. Her skin is delicate as snow, and occasionally there was a faint fragrance, which made people feel refreshed. 0. You are lying. Tina's red lips moved slightly, she gritted her silver teeth, and shouted. I'm cheating. Li Ang waved his hand and said with a smile, then tell me, how did I cheat? If you were right, then I will admit defeat. You. Tina didn't know what to say for a while, the slender jade hand pointing at Li Ang trembled a little, biting her pink lips, her beautiful eyes struggled a little. A faint halo shone down. Li Ang's face gradually appeared in her eyes, clearly visible. You are. Tina's pupils shrank, her pretty face became very horrified, her red lips trembled, and she said in a trembling voice. You recognize me, that's no fun. Li Ang was stunned for a moment, and then said helplessly. You are, Li Ang. Tina pointed at Li Ang, her whole face was horrified and she lost her voice. This face, as a Navy, how could she forget? Li Ang's face, basically, anyone in the Navy can recognize it. The turmoil that the other party brought to the Navy at the beginning was so great that all navies were once asked to remember this face. In the future, if you encounter this person at sea, you must not provoke it. Unexpectedly, because of the lack of light at night, she actually asked a monster with such a terrifying strength to fight the opponent. Thinking of this, Tina's pretty face turned pale, and she couldn't hide her panic. NLT, 32 and GT. Chapter 357_hard to play. So, you should admit defeat, little girl, who made you not recognize me the first time, and arrogantly want to gamble with me. Now you know how ridiculous your words just now are. Quote. Li Ang patted Tina's shoulders earnestly and smiled. Hearing these words, Tina thought of what she had just said, her face blushed and she couldn't help herself. Now she can't wait to find a scene to get in, it's too embarrassing. The arrogant words just now, in front of the ordinary Navy, can definitely deter the opponent. But the person I met was Li Ang, so it was a little embarrassing. Not only does it have no deterrent effect, but instead, it is like a clown performing. Tina took a half step back and buried her head, not knowing what she was thinking, her pretty face turned pale. She knew that she lost. In front of Li Ang, fighting the opponent, this is undoubtedly self-defeating. 687. Even a general would not dare to fight Li Ang so blatantly. Her actions were simply too reckless and impulsive. Looking back now, she thinks how ridiculous her decision was. You lost, it's time to keep your promise. Li Ang stood in front of Tina, smelling the body fragrance emanating from the other party's body. He couldn't help but took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said bluntly. At this time, Tina fell into a tangle in her heart and didn't care about Li Ang's actions at all. She lowered her head and looked at her shoes, struggling extremely. A long time. She raised her head and looked at Li Ang with a firm expression, her red lips parted slightly, and said, I'm sorry, it was my fault, I shouldn't have bumped into you. What? I can't hear you. Li Ang approached his ear and said exaggeratedly in front of Tina's red lips. Tina's pretty face flushed, and she shouted angrily, I said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I heard, why are you talking so loudly? Are you afraid that others won't know that we are here? Li Ang scratched his ears and said slowly. Didn't you tell me to be loud? Tina snorted coldly, turned her head away, and didn't look at Li Ang again. That's right. Li Ang's eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, I almost forgot one thing, do you still owe me one thing that I haven't implemented? Well, Tina Maimu said in a panic, what do you want me to do? This condition is exactly what Li Ang raised the stakes. Thinking of this, Tina looked at Li Ang fiercely, she finally understood. It turned out that from the very beginning, Li Ang had designed a sleeve and let her drill into it. And she foolishly thought that it was Li Ang's trick. But she didn't expect that, in fact, it was her own trick. It's you. Tina realized it later, pointed at Li Ang, and said angrily. You just know that. Li Ang laughed, rubbed Tina's soft pink hair, and said, so, in the future, don't think that you have a chance to win, so you can agree to other people's conditions. The opponent's trap. I gave you a free lesson today. It's free. Seeing Tina's increasingly angry expression, Li Ang did not forget to brag about himself. Go away. Tina's red lips parted slightly, and she shouted angrily. You still haven't done what you promised me, how can I get out? Li Ang leaned against Tina's cheek very wickedly and said. Go away. Tina quickly pushed Li Ang away and said angrily. She puffed out her face and looked like an angry little girl, but her beautiful eyes were shining brightly, but she was very obscure and undetectable. Chapter 357 Hard to play. NLT, 33 and GT. She puffed out her face and looked like an angry little girl, but her beautiful eyes were shining brightly, but she was very obscure and undetectable. She was angry on purpose, she wanted to avoid Li Ang's conditions. It can be seen that she is also a little smart. However, Li Ang didn't care about Tina's face at all, and said bluntly, I am willing to admit defeat, don't try to be rude, what I want you to do today, you have to do it, this is what you said by yourself, otherwise, you will be playing 5 times a day. Thunder boom, don't die. You. Tina pointed at Li Ang and said angrily, okay, what do you want me to do? It's just that she was also a little numb in her heart. What if Li Ang, the bad guy, wanted her to do those things with him? How can this be? If I knew it earlier, I shouldn't be so impulsive. Only now, there is no room for remorse. Seeing Tina's gnashing face, Li Ang's eyes flashed, and he wanted to be direct and let Tina stay with him all night. But in this case, it seems to be counterproductive, and it will get serious resistance from Tina herself. You can't lose the other person's entire life just for one night. Therefore, Li Ang did not directly put forward this condition. Wouldn't it be better to get a woman's heart? In this way, a woman will belong to Li Ang all her life. For this reason, Li Ang can't really anger Tina, and he can't make such a request so directly. If it's too much, it's not clear whether Tina will agree. But there will definitely be an iron lump in Tina's heart, and she will look extremely disgusting when facing him in the future. To avoid this, Li Ang decided to gradually cycle slowly. It can be regarded as a hard-to-find move. How about I let you stay with me one night? Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. Go to hell. Tina's face was angry, her eyes gradually became disgusting, and the eyes that looked at Li Ang were very disgusting. Just kidding. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he said with a smile, you can believe whatever you say. She really is a little girl who is easy to be deceived. How could I say such excessive demands? Huh. Tina snorted coldly, and her face turned slightly. Her heart was pounding, and she pretended to be calm. At the same time, she also glanced at Li Ang next to her from the corner of her eye. After the other party said those words, she had a good feeling in her heart. It's just that she was stubborn and didn't show it. Fortunately, this guy didn't make such excessive demands. If this is the case, then I don't know whether to agree or not to agree. This guy seems to have a bit of a 0.0 conscience. Tina thought to herself, her pretty face softened a little bit, but she still kept her face straight, pretending to be angry. Well, I'll lower the conditions a little bit. Li Ang looked at Tina and smiled, how about you kiss me? This condition is very moderate. The measure is very good, it will not make Tina disgusted, but it will make Tina deeply remember in her heart, which can be said to be 2 stones with 1 stone. Perfect condition. Kiss you. Tina's pretty face was flushed with blood, her face was hot, and her beautiful eyes were a bit shy and hesitant, and a small voice like a mosquito came out. Unexpectedly, this guy actually let people kiss him. Should you agree? However, his conditions are not excessive. Immediately, Tina's heart was deeply entangled, and she couldn't make a decision for a long time. NLT, 34 and GT. Chapter 358 favorable increase. You can't be fooled, or you won't be able to die when you talk about five thunders. I think you should know what to do. This request is not too much. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled. I see. Tina blushed and said angrily. However, her expression was also full of shyness. A faint halo shone down from midair, shining on her delicate face, revealing her rosy and very seductive face in Liang's eyes. Charming facial features, with a strong heroic spirit, pink and supple hair thrown on the shoulders, eyes erect on the forehead, red lips trembling slightly. Thinking about it, she was also quite nervous. After all, how to say, although she has just turned 30 years old, in the eyes of others, she is already an old maid. However, there are many things that she does not know as much as some girls. For example, her first words are still there. If she promised Liang, she would be a little embarrassed. Come on, there's no time to delay. If you can't accept this condition, it's not that I can't change it. 17 It's just that my other conditions will be more difficult. Liang looked at the shy Tina and said with a smile. The two fell into silence again. The atmosphere is very subtle. Tina remained motionless, slightly curling her soft pink hair, making her delicate facial features more attractive, with fair skin and reddish white. You close your eyes. Tina looked at Liang, did not dare to look directly into the eyes of the other party, and said quickly. Good. Liang nodded with a smile on his face. Immediately, he closed his eyes slightly, and there was still a tiny gap when looking directly at him, which was used to observe Tina's every move. He really wanted to see what the little girl Tina would do. I can't see, I can't open my eyes. Tina's voice trembled, and she reminded nervously. Don't worry. Liang's face was calm and he said slowly. After about half a minute. Tina gathered her courage, took a deep breath, her delicate face kept approaching Liang's cheek, and she looked at each other's face up close, which made her feel more and more uneasy. However, at first glance, this guy is not very annoying. Tina looked at Liang's profile and thought shyly. However, her pretty face turned crimson again, like the sunset on the horizon, brilliantly red. Close. Getting closer. Tina could see the pores on Liang's face. She was very nervous, her body trembled involuntarily, and a cold sweat broke out in her palms. This was the first time she had seen a man's face so closely, and when she thought of what to do next, her mood was indescribable. Don't open your eyes, you can't open your eyes anyway. Tina's face was rosy, cute and charming, and hurriedly said. She was afraid that Liang would open her eyes and see her appearance, which made her even more embarrassed. In order to avoid this embarrassing situation, she had to let Liang compare her eyes to reduce the tension in her heart. Immediately, she took a deep breath, her long eyelashes fluttered, and she closed her eyes, her pink lips gradually approaching Liang's cheeks. It's just that her undisguised tension was still exposed on that charming face. At this moment, after Liang saw that Tina had closed her eyes, she suddenly opened her eyes, the corners of her mouth were slightly upturned, with a smile. Oh, it seems that someone bit me. After speaking, he suddenly changed the direction of his body. Chapter 358 favorable improvement. NLT, 35 and GT. After speaking, he suddenly changed the direction of his body. Originally, his side face was facing Tina's front face. In this case, Tina will kiss his profile accurately without any accident. But now, the unexpected happened. As Liang turned around, his front was aimed at Tina's front, and he bent down deliberately so that his face could show a positive horizontal line with Tina's pretty face. Between the two, the indescribable place is exactly opposite to each other. Before Tina could react, she already kissed her. Her beautiful eyes were wide and round. This is very different from the touch she imagined. Why, there is water. Liang's eyes appeared in her eyes, and the two looked at each other. Ah! Tina quickly reached out and pushed Liang away, screaming loudly. Her breathing became messy, and the figure of the devil, accompanied by her unsteady breathing, kept shaking. It was really a beautiful landscape. Her beautiful eyes were annoyed. She looked at Liang, and shouted, You, how can you do this? How is it? Liang wiped the sweetness from the corner of his mouth and asked with a smile. You actually deceived me. Tina's pretty face was full of anger, and when she recalled the scene just now, her mood was pounding and she was extremely nervous. That's my natural reaction. Who let a mosquito bite me all of a sudden? Who would have thought that a mosquito would suddenly appear here? It's really abominable. Liang also said fiercely with a look of anger. This made Tina a little stunned. Immediately, she pointed at Liang. Her anger still did not subside, and said, Anyway, you did it on purpose. Let's be fair, I really didn't mean to. Liang waved his hand helplessly, and his heart blossomed with joy. The sweet taste is really not ordinary delicious. However, on the surface, it is naturally impossible to show such an expression. If Tina knows, it will really fall short. Humph. Tina snorted coldly and listened to Liang's words, although she believed it a little. But in general, she still can't accept this. This is the first tone she has kept for 30 years. Unexpectedly, Liang, who has just met for 300 years, will be taken away directly. The more she thought about it, the more angry she felt in her heart. She gritted her silver teeth and waited fiercely for Liang, her beautiful eyes burning with flames. Women are too angry. If they are angry, they will grow old easily. Liang smiled and rubbed Tina's pink hair, said. I want you to take care of it. Tina shook off Liang's hands, turned around angrily, stepped on red high heels, and left step by step. You just left. Liang waved his hand, looked at Tina's shadow, and smiled. Tina paused, apparently still caring about Liang. However, the anger in her heart made her not stop, just leaving a clear and angry voice. I don't want to see you. Gradually, Tina disappeared from Liang's sight. Standing in the same place, Liang's eyes twinkled brightly, pursed his lips, and the smile on his face became even brighter. He could see that he had entered Tina's heart initially. Especially the witty accident just now made Tina angry, but she didn't directly break her impression of Liang, she was just very angry. In this way, Liang left a deep impression in Tina's heart, but it would not arouse Tina's disgust and disgust. In simple terms, it means that in Tina's heart, her favorability towards Liang has increased. NLT, 36 and GT. Chapter 359 _ Tina also has a sweetheart. A seed has been planted, waiting for the time to germinate. This day is not far away, and I am waiting for good news. Liang's eyes flickered, watching Tina's back gradually disappear. He turned around and left here step by step. It is completely different from when he came, and now he can be said to have been perfectly relaxed both physically and mentally. There is also a beautiful and lovely woman who is thinking of him in her heart, and his mood must be self-evident. When I came out, I got a beautiful little girl. The harvest this time was too big. Thanks to this guy Hawkeye, I might not have met him. Liang laughed and left step by step. The other side. After escaping from Liang's sight in a hurry, Tina couldn't calm down, clutching her chest, breathing disorderly, and the rosy blood on her pretty face still couldn't be easily dissipated. So nervous, Tina is so nervous. Tina leaned her back against the tree trunk, covered her face with her hands, and muttered to herself. In her head now, she recalled the scene just now all the time. The intimate contact made it impossible for her to let go in a short period of time. Originally, the contact was not very intimate, but because of an accident, the intimacy was heated up directly. It is for this reason that Tina has not been able to break free from the state just now. Therefore, she hurriedly escaped from Liang's sight to prevent her from being seen by the other party. It was too embarrassing and embarrassing. Never mind, anyway, it's just an accident. Yes, just an accident. Tina took a deep breath and tried her best to calm down. It's a pity that, no matter what, it is difficult for her to relax this nervous and tense mood. Looking ahead, she saw the building in front of her. Relieved a little, a pair of slender long legs took a step, stepped on red high heels, and returned to her residence. When she returned to her residence, she saw her best friend and friend, Colonel Eggers. He and Tina are colleagues and friendly girlfriends. Although her appearance is not as charming as Tina, she is still a beautiful woman. When he saw Tina, Egston was shocked and quickly pulled Tina back to the room. She asked, "Tina, what's wrong with you?" "No, nothing." Tina blushed and shook her head, said, "Are you okay? Look in the mirror yourself. My God, did your face drink 90-degree liquor? Otherwise, how could it be so red?" Eggers looked left and right, looked at Tina's body up and down, and took a good look at it. See? Tina couldn't help it, so she quickly turned aside and walked to the side, emphasizing again, "It's really nothing, it's just that something happened on the road." "Some things. I'm afraid it doesn't seem easy. Colonel Tina, who can make us a strong woman, is so red. Thinking about it, these things are naturally very intriguing." Eggers smiled a little narrowly, walked to Tina's side, and said with a smile, "Don't talk nonsense." Tina dodged her eyes, pushed Eggers away quickly, and said, "I don't care, I'll take a shower and then go to bed. You can do it yourself, anyway, don't bother me." "Don't, we, Colonel Tina, also fell in love. I must understand it clearly. Besides, I have to check for you." Eggers saw through Tina's thoughts in an instant and smiled. Hearing this, Tina May didn't dare to face Eggers' words. Her face became even more rosy, and she hurriedly planned to enter the bathroom. But he was blocked by Eggers in advance. He folded his arms around his chest, and said with a smile, "Our lovely and charming Tina also has a sweetheart. This is rare. As your good best friend, I have to give you love. Check it out. Tell me, who is he? I will never say it, you can rest assured. Otherwise, you won't want to leave tonight." Eggers pretended to be vicious and said, Chapter 359 Tina also has a sweetheart. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 37 and GT. Eggers pretended to be vicious and said, "Don't make a fuss, really not." Tina still shook her head, shaking her pink hair, said, "Nonsense, judging from my years of experience in the love scene. Your face, your mood, your eyes, and your every move are all revealing one thing, and I can see it at a glance." Eggers laughed and said confidently, "Get out of the way." Tina couldn't stand Eggers' questioning and said again, "If you don't tell me, I won't leave." Eggers strengthened his belief and smiled meaningfully. "I don't know which stinky man was able to win the favor of our beautiful Tina. This is the luck of 8 lifetimes. Don't talk nonsense, it's really not what you think." Tina's mood was pounding, and for some reason, she suddenly remembered Li Yang's figure again, and the scene of intimate contact with the other party was still lingering in her heart and could not be easily dissipated. Look, your face is red again. I'm right, you must have met your little lover outside. Our Colonel Tina, finally, has a partner." Eggers smiled narrowly, leaned beside Tina, and said. Seeing her best friend's perseverance, Tina completely lost her mind. Her eyes flashed and she said tentatively, I don't know what the situation is, you can help me analyze it." "Leave it to me." Eggers laughed and said confidently. "I just keep thinking of him, so, does it count as liking him?" Tina's eyes dodged, and her voice became a little weak, said. "Of course, I'm sure, Tina, you must like each other. As a woman, I'm 100% sure that you are in a state of falling in love right now." Eggers said with a firm face and direct affirmation. "What then?" Tina panicked for a while, she had never experienced this. At this time, Eggers looked at Tina's delicate face, which was a little flustered, and burst into laughter. Tina, in front of pirates, you are not like this. At that time, you were a cold-faced and ruthless Navy colonel. If you make fun of me again, I won't talk about it. Tina's pretty face was a little crimson, said. Okay, I won't talk about it, I will help you continue the analysis. Eggers turned serious and said, tell me the truth about what happened to you just now. Tina told Eggers what happened just now. This time, it was Eggers' turn to be stunned. She was dumbfounded, looking at the pretty and charming Tina in front of her, and took a good look at Tina from bottom to top. The tall figure, slender legs, and flawless face really made countless women jealous. What do you mean, you and Li Ang have kissed? Eggers stared blankly at Tina and asked in a voiceless voice. Yes. Tina's face was still crimson, and she nodded. My God. Eggers was shocked and blurted out, Li Ang. Are you sure the other party is Li Ang? This is really terrifying. I have to say, Tina, what luck did you have? It's Li Ang. Tina recalled Li Ang's face, which was exactly the same as the image on the reward list issued by the Navy at that time, without any discrepancy. Therefore, she is absolutely certain that the person she met just now is 100% the legendary Li Ang, no doubt. Chapter 360-Desolate Smoker. I'm so jealous. Eggers cried, looked aggrieved, looked at Tina, and said, Tina, you are very lucky. You actually met Li Ang. Now, you are lucky. Guess yes. What's the matter? I didn't say I liked him. Tina blushed, lowered her head, and said. Come on, looking at you like this, even if I think with my toes, I can see that you like him. It's not a shameful thing, just admit it. What's more, a man as good as Li Ang would be tempted by a woman. Let alone you. If it were me, I would pursue him on the spot with a fierce offensive. So, you're lucky. Eggers stared at Tina with all envy, jealousy and hatred, wishing to see through the other party. She had to cry out of grievance, looked at her figure, and said, why can't I grow such a good figure and facial features as you? God is so unfair to me. Okay, don't say it, it's not good if you let others know. Tina quickly covered Eggers' mouth and said nervously. Afraid of what? Eggers broke free of Tina and said directly, everyone is in free love. Can't you fall in love? Who has such a rule? 750. It's just that people aren't necessarily interested in me. Tina's pretty face was slightly red, and she lowered her head and said. Not necessarily. Eggers' eyes flickered, and he said seriously, according to my inference, there is an 80% chance that he is interested in you. Only a simple girl like you would believe the accident you mentioned. In my opinion, he must have lied about the accident. Therefore, I can absolutely tell you that he must have a good impression of you. Having said this, Eggers' eyes of envy and hatred appeared again. Looking at it made Tina feel a little nervous and said, what's wrong? Tina, can you introduce me to me? I want to meet Li Ang too. Eggers said with hopeful eyes. Can't. Tina rejected it directly, raised her head, a smile appeared on her delicate face, and said, what the hell are you thinking, don't I know? My good Tina, I also know each other. If I am close to this existence, then I will be in the Navy, and I can retire directly and become a full-time housewife. Eggers said with a bit of longing in his eyes. You can get it BHBC, people may not like you. Tina had to attack her girlfriend directly at this time. Eggers was stunned, looked at Tina with an angry face, and said, okay, Tina, I kindly analyze it for you, but you actually beat me. You don't know if I don't clean up you so hard today. Why are the flowers so red? By the way, don't talk about this matter. Tina looked at Eggers suspiciously, for fear that this big mouth would make things known to everyone. Don't worry, my character is still worthy of recognition. Eggers laughed, patted his slightly protruding chest, and said. Immediately, she looked at Tina's conspicuous and proud figure in front of her, and hid in the corner, drawing circles with a downcast face, her expression full of loss. Seeing Egger's appearance, Tina waved her hand and entered the bathroom directly. Suddenly, Eggers looked at Tina with a bit of resentment in his eyes, and said, "Tina, why don't you come to comfort me?" "I can't comfort you, anyway, no matter what you say, you will feel better yourself." Tina's voice came out. It made Eggers even more angry, turning anger into appetite, and frantically swept the fruit on the table. After half an hour. After Tina came out of the bathroom, there was no sign of Eggers. She shook her water-stained hair and said to herself, "Where did this guy go?" Chapter 360 _ The Down and Out Smoker. NLT, 39 and GT. She shook her water-stained hair and said to herself, "Where did this guy go?" Suddenly, her pupils shrank, and her beautiful eyes had a somewhat ominous premonition. This guy's character. Right now, I'm afraid it's already in the naval headquarters. She has been publicizing the things she just did. Damn girl. Tina's delicate face was full of icy expressions, gnashing her teeth and hating her heart. If I knew it earlier, I shouldn't have told this big mouth. It should be guessed that after finishing speaking, these news will definitely spread. As expected. 10 minutes later. Dong dong dong. The door was knocked. Tina raised her brows, walked to the door, did not open the door, and asked, "Who?" "Tina, it's me, Smoker." Smog stood in front of Tina's door, his face a little heavy and his voice hoarse. "Smog, what are you doing with me? I'm asleep." Tina's face was calm and she said slowly, "I heard that your relationship with Liang is what it was rumored to be like. In my impression, there should be no connection between you and Liang. I think this is definitely a rumor. However, I still want to ask you." Smoker's voice was particularly low, said. He graduated in the same class as Tina, and usually has a good relationship with Tina. As one of the few beautiful women in the Navy, he naturally has a bit of a favorable impression of Tina, but he is not good at expressing it on weekdays, so he doesn't say it. But now, when he heard that Tina and Liang had a close relationship, he couldn't hold back the heaviness in his heart, and came to ask at the first time, otherwise he wouldn't be able to fall asleep. At this time, facing Smog's questioning, Tina was silent. Her eyes flashed across the scene she met with Liang, her pretty face showed a hint of ruddy, the corners of her mouth also drew an arc, and her eyes softened. This guy. Thinking of this, Tina's eyes became firm and she said slowly, "It's true, what's wrong?" She understands Smoker's thoughts, but she already has someone she likes. This person is Liang. I see. Smog's face changed slightly, he sighed, turned his head helplessly, and gradually left here. In the room. After Tina felt that there was no one outside, she breathed a sigh of relief, and finally got rid of a big trouble. She is naturally aware of Smog's thoughts, but on weekdays, she can't think of a way to refuse. Now that's it, you can directly let the other party give up. However, when she thought of the fact that she had admitted that she liked Liang just now, it still made her feel ashamed. Damn Eggers, when she comes back, I will tear her mouth apart. Tina gritted her silver teeth and said viciously. But when she thought that because Eggers also helped her admit that she liked Liang, her mood was very tangled. Liang, do you like yourself too? She was worried, if all this was just speculation. Does he not like him at all? How can this be? Immediately, she didn't even have the mood to sleep. She was lying on the bed with her long, slender legs as white as snow, her eyes staring at the ceiling, lost in thought, unable to speak for a long time.